Yeah, well, your staff should have told us that. Committee will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be allowed to call recess at any time without objection so ordered. I welcome our witnesses and thank them for their service to our nation. Today we'll hear from the Department of the Navy regarding the FY26 budget request. While I appreciate the budget documents received last week, we still lack the necessary details to fully evaluate how Congress can best support our sailors and Marines and maritime nation. As a maritime nation, our naval capabilities are central to our ability to deter our adversaries, especially China. We can't do that without growing the surface and submarine fleets. But when it comes to shipbuilding, we remain woefully behind schedule and way over budget. We took the first step towards accelerating shipbuilding and rebuilding our maritime industrial base through the House-passed reconciliation bill. This once-in-a-generation legislation will invest over $34 billion to expand the size and enhance the capability of our naval fleet. It includes funds to field critically needed new capabilities like the FAXX and the unmanned vehicle vessels. These capabilities are essential to deterring China. But it also builds capacity and improves infrastructure across our public shipyards and maritime industrial base. It's not enough to fully fund and rebuild our naval strength. We need to also continue investment in the out years. We need to send a clear demand signal to the industrial base of exactly what we're buying. We also need to reform the way we buy ships. I think the problem starts with a broken requirements process. We've seen it needlessly increase delivery timelines and cost. Shipbuilding isn't the only area impacted by our flawed acquisition process either. The entire defense acquisition system is too slow, rigid, and bureaucratic to meet our needs. To maintain American deterrence, we need to equip our warfighters with what they need and when they need it. Ranking Member Smith and I have introduced legislation to reform our flawed acquisition system. This bipartisan SPEED Act will be foundational to the FY26 NDAA. It streamlines and modernizes defense acquisition, and it ensures that our acquisition process is centered on one primary objective: equipping warfighters in the quickest and most cost-effective manner possible. I look forward to working with my colleagues in the administration on this effort. I know that Secretary Phelan has spent a lot of time examining the problems with the Navy's acquisition process and shipbuilding capacity. I was happy to hear the Secretary is encouraging the use of creative teaming agreements between our traditional shipbuilders and our non-traditional defense companies to expand the nation's maritime and submarine industrial base. I commend him for taking on these complicated issues with a new perspective and innovative solutions. I look forward to hearing his thoughts and recommendations on how to make further improvements. Beyond our acquisition issues, I continue to be concerned with the overall readiness of our naval fleet. We need to realize the 80% surge-ready vision for the entire fleet, including our amphibious forces, in the near future. At the heart of this amphibious ship challenge is the Navy's inability to adequately support amphibious force structure. Half of the amphibious fleet is in unsatisfactory condition, and as a result, we can no longer support a heel-to-toe deploy of our Marine Expeditionary Forces, and that's unacceptable. Our amphibious forces are the bedrock of our rapid response force and essential for the projection of power in the Indo-PACOM area. We need to fix this problem as soon as possible. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on how we can work together to ensure our sailors and Marines have the resources they need. And with that, I yield to the ranking member for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you summed up the situation quite well. I agree with pretty much everything you said. Budget, starting with that, a couple problems with the budget. One, we don't have one. It's very late. It's later than it's ever been, which gives a degree of uncertainty to the process here that is very difficult to deal with. I spoke with Secretary Phelan yesterday. We tried to talk through a couple ships here and there. We don't know what's going to be asked for and how that's going to work. That process needs to get started soon. Even when we do get the budget, we still have major challenges. We have demands that far outstrip the resources that are available available, which means we're gonna have to get smart about how we spend our money. A quote I've used often in this committee from Winston Churchill: "Gentlemen, we're out of money, now we're going to have to think." That is going to be really, really true going forward, no matter when that budget comes out. And the chairman correctly identified, two of the big problems. Every ship program that we have is way over budget and way behind. We're struggling through that. We have major capacity issues in terms of workforce and shipyards that we have to try to deal with. So that entire picture, very complicated, very difficult, and short of the resources that we would like to have. So we're going to be very interested in conversation today about how you intend to attack that very difficult problem, readily acknowledging that the gentleman before us here today did not create that problem. This dates back through multiple administrations and a number of years. We just need to work together to figure out how to fix it. And then the problem that the chairman identified, the readiness issue. The ships that we do have are not ready at to the pace that they should be. Some of that is a matter of retiring old ships that are no longer performing. I think there are potentially AI solutions. I've been very impressed with what the Air Force has been able to do with predictive maintenance through the use of AI to make things more, to basically figure out when it's going to break before it breaks and fix it. So we've got a lot of work to do there. I'm interested in how we can work with foreign partners, as long as we still have foreign partners who do have massive shipbuilding capacity and could potentially work with us to help deal with those issues. And then the other challenge is, what's the right mix? We've all seen from the war in Ukraine and from the rapid pace of innovation just the amazing things that autonomous systems have been able to accomplish. How do we factor that into the fleet while we are still, building aircraft carriers and destroyers, submarines, and all of that? What is the right mix of those capabilities? And then the final point, what has really become the battle, is survivability. Being able to have missile defense capabilities, counter-drone capabilities, secure communications, to make sure that we can continue to communicate with our weapon systems as they're being deployed in the face of adversary efforts to disrupt that. All of that needs to come together in a coherent plan. We are clearly not there at the moment, but in the next couple of months, as the budget comes in, as we begin to work through this, those are the challenges that we're all going to have to work together to try to meet. It's not going to be easy. I don't pretend that anyone has, a simple answer or that it's any one specific person's fault. But these are major, major challenges that we're going to need to resolve if we're going to be able to meet the defense needs and the national security needs of our country. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Ranking Member yields back. I'd like to now introduce our witnesses. The Honorable John Phelan, Secretary of the Navy. Admiral James Kilby, Acting Chief of Naval Operations, and General Eric Smith, Commandant of the Marine Corps. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for your service to our country. Secretary Phelan, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today alongside General Smith and Admiral Kilby. I'm grateful to President Trump for the trust he's placed in me to lead this department and serve as the 79th Secretary of the Navy. I'm also grateful to this committee for your continued support of our Navy Marine Corps team. Distinguished members of this committee, my North Star as Secretary is readiness. Before a dollar is spent on any capability, an exquisite platform, or infrastructure, I will always ask the following question: what is the impact to our readiness? And does it increase or does it add to it? If the answer is no, we will not spend that dollar. As stated to this committee before, I'm focused on 3 priority areas. First, strengthening shipbuilding in the maritime industrial base. Second, fostering adaptive, accountable, and innovative warfighter culture. Third, improving the health, welfare, and training of our people, our sailors, Marines, and their families. Since my confirmation 2.5 months ago, I've been on a listening and learning tour. I've traveled across the country and visited some of our allies overseas. I visited our public, private, and overseas shipyards, as well as our installations. And I've met with many of our sailors, Marines, and shipyard workers. What I have learned is this: we are still the dominant naval power, but our adversaries are closing the gap at a concerning and accelerating rate. We need to make important cultural and strategic changes in order to maintain our competitive advantage. And we need to address a culture, one riddled with bureaucratic decision-making and gold-plated requirements that is endemic to this department. Because there is no doubt we are operating in a world that is more hostile and unpredictable. As evidenced by recent conflicts, warfare as we know it is changing dramatically. China is no longer just a pacing threat. It is our primary competitor, both economically and militarily. With their naval fleet nearing 400 ships, China's goal is not the defense of its homeland only. It is the forward projection of power and influence. In the Indo-Pacific, our Navy Marine Corps team is deepening cooperation with our allies and partners to strengthen deterrence and keep open our sea lines of communication. At home, they are supporting homeland defense through Task Force Zapper, providing surveillance, logistics, and manpower at the southern border. And in the Red Sea, they've defeated scores of missiles and drones from Iranian-backed Houthis, helped defend our regional allies, and guaranteed access to a major artery of global trade. Our global presence sends a clear message to the world. The United States Navy and Marine Corps are prepared and ready to fight and win anytime and anywhere. However, our naval superiority is under threat. For too long, we have allowed our shipbuilding industry to erode, hollowing out the very capacity we need to maintain credible naval deterrence. That must change. Rebuilding our maritime industrial base is not just a matter of economic policy, it is a national security imperative. President Trump's executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance highlights that urgency and has begun to put us on the right path. I have been to 10 shipyards, 7 here in the United States and 3 overseas, and I've spoken directly with shipyard leaders and the hardworking tradesmen essential to our maritime operations. I now have a clear picture of our challenges, and I'm developing a plan to fix what's broken. We need to act with urgency, and this will take a whole-of-government approach to rebuild our capacity and expertise. We are developing a deliberate, actionable plan to restore our industrial base, but we cannot do it alone. Congress, private industry, and the Department of Navy must work collaboratively if we are serious about ensuring our naval superiority. In closing, it is clear that our greatest asset is the extraordinary men and women who serve, our sailors and Marines. We will continue to invest in them through smarter recruitment, better training, and targeted retention efforts to retain top-tier talent. And we will prioritize quality of service initiatives to ensure that our sailors, Marines, and their families have the resources they need. Marine General Charles Krulak aptly stated that the future of an organization is in the hands of the privates in the field, not the generals back home. Our job, my job, is to ensure they have every tool, every advantage, and every ounce of support they need to succeed. Thank you for your support. I look forward to your questions today.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That's our job, too. I appreciate you highlighting that. Admiral Kilby, you're recognized next.
Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the United States Navy today. Your Navy provides the nation with sea power and sea control that is needed to preserve our way of life and ensure our security and prosperity. Your oversight and funding ensure we are ready when the nation calls. I'm pleased to testify alongside Secretary Phelan, who brings needed and unique skills and experiences to help us accelerate the work of the Navy, and alongside my partner, General Smith, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. In the past year, our sailors have defeated hundreds of drones and missiles and executed dozens of strikes from the Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean. They have strengthened alliances and deterred Chinese aggression in the Western Pacific, and they have supported operations on the southern border. They have maintained an unbroken strategic deterrent with our ballistic missile submarines. In short, the Navy, integrated with the Joint Force, remains postured and ready to fight and win. We remain committed to a strong global Navy, one that is prepared to defend our homeland, deter our adversaries, and prevail in war. We are laser-focused on China as our most consequential opponent, and while strengthening our defenses in the homeland. We prioritize our operations, training, and readiness accounts to ensure our naval forces remain ready, resilient, and able to execute national tasking. The Navy and Marine Corps preserves peace through strength through investments in our strategic deterrence, our defense industrial base, and our installations via initiatives like the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Program. Most importantly, we are continuing our strong commitment to our people, our sailors, our Navy families, and our civilians through pay raises and investments in quality of service such as unaccompanied housing and child care. But we are facing some challenges. First, our platforms are not as ready as they need to be. We set an ambitious goal to make 80% of our submarines, ships, and aircraft combat surge ready by 1 January 2027, and we're not there. To do that, we are reducing maintenance delays and improving manning, training, modernization, and sustainment. Secondly, the Navy has 22,950 gaps at sea. Thanks to process improvements and targeted investments, we are on plan to reduce that number significantly by the end of 2026. We are committed to attracting and developing Americans who can innovate, solve hard problems, and dominate in combat. The Navy contracted over 40,000 sailors last year, the most since 2003, and we are currently on pace to exceed that recruiting goal for 2025. Thirdly, our ordnance expenditures in the Red Sea have highlighted the strain on our munitions industrial base. The Navy is working with traditional primes and new entrants to close this gap, developing kinetic and non-kinetic weapons at speed and scale. In all of these efforts, consistent and predictable funding is foundational. We appreciate the continued support of this committee. In closing, I'm proud of our Navy's accomplishments in the past year, and I'm excited about the growing consensus that is powering our maritime rejuvenation. This whole-of-government and whole-of-nation approach is essential to our security and prosperity. We have work to do to ensure that we remain the most powerful Navy in the world for the next 250 years. Your leadership and support are critical in achieving this imperative. On behalf of the sailors and civilians and families around the world, thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. General Smith, you're recognized.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to appear before you today alongside Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, my shipmate, to represent your Marine Corps. I'm going to keep my comments short so I can answer your questions. First, I'd like to start by sharing the Marine Corps' top 3 priorities. First is restoring a 3.0 amphibious ready group Marine Expeditionary Unit presence. This simply means 1 amphibious ready group constantly deployed off the East Coast, 1 constantly deployed off the West Coast to cover down on the totality of the Pacific, and 1 episodically deployed out of Okinawa, Japan, our FDNF, our forward deployed naval force. The amphibious ready group with the Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked is the most versatile tool in our nation's inventory. It is truly the Swiss Army knife of the joint force. We're working closely with our Navy partners to maximize this capability. My second priority is accelerating force design. Force design is our journey to adapt to the changing character of war. The nature of war remains constant, but the character changes. We're in the implementation phase now. We're fielding new capabilities and reshaping formations across the force, from our Marine Expeditionary Units and Marine Littoral Regiments to our Marine Expeditionary Forces. And finally, improving quality of life. Every Marine deserves a clean, safe place to lay their head down at night. Barracks 2030 is how we're getting after this. This is our most consequential housing investment in history. It is a quality of life issue that goes beyond our barracks. We're also investing in the well-being of Marine families, because you recruit the Marine, but you retain the family. And retaining our Marines means supporting those who stand beside them. I'll close with this. Your Marines remain the most ready when the nation is least ready. That's our mantra. A forward-postured force, trained for combat, and built to deliver flexible, lethal options anytime, anywhere. Thank you again for your trust and support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. I recognize myself first for questions. Secretary Phelan, since you took your position, you've been conducting reviews of shipbuilding programs. Can you tell us what your takeaways are from those reviews, and what are your plans to get our shipbuilding programs back on track?
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I don't have good news. All of our programs are a mess, to be honest. We are behind schedule and over budget. I think our best performing one is 6 months late and 57% over budget. So I am working very hard to try to get.
And you said that's the best one?
That is the best one, I believe. So we are working very hard to get these fixed. Now, I think the Navy has begun to make some rapid changes at the public shipyards, and we've been talking, I've met with both with Electric Boat and Huntington Ingalls when I was at their yards in terms of some of the changes we are trying to make to shift the schedule left, particularly on those platforms that are extremely important, like the Columbia and Virginia-class submarines. I think we've got some plans in place that will help shift that schedule left, and then we are working on the costs and trying to understand the whole procurement way we procures and the way we're going to attempt to budget going forward, or not budget, contract going forward with them. And so I would tell you, as I think I said in my opening statement, this is really a whole of government approach. I think there's two ways to look at it. There's two ways I look at it. There's a short run and a long run. In the short run, I have got to get hulls in the water. And so that means all options are open. So we have to look at foreign and domestic. In the long run, I've got to get the maritime industrial base in this country back on its feet because it's strategic, and that will take a longer amount of time, but we will have to do it. We have enough business today. We could not fulfill all the business we have today in the United States. So we have to probably expand shipyards. We probably need to open new shipyards as well.
And expand on that. How can we help you do that? And how would that functionally work?
So I think we're still in the early stages of putting these thoughts together. I think it will it's obviously going to require capital. It's going to require not having 5-year environmental studies and huge bureaucracy to get things done. We will need to move with speed. And I think, I look forward, once we have that plan, to working with this committee and coming to you with some real specifics around it. But, I feel like I'm in a perpetual game of whack-a-mole whenever I kind of unveil something or look at some new program. Right now, I've been very focused on the subs because it is critical and we need to get that done. And we just recently did the Virginia contract. We've got another big contract coming up, which we need to deal with. I'm just kind of step by step going through. Now I got to deal with carriers, then I'll deal with DDGs. And we will just go step by step through each one of these and try to get that done and figure out, diagnose the problems and get them done. But I also would say to you, look, we've got a work shortage. We've got to get more workers. I think the wage package we put together in Groton and Quonset was a good step forward on the Virginia contracts, and I thank this committee for that. I think that we need to get much more efficient, much better. When I was in Korea, I got in a DDG that's 10% bigger than ours. A very good ship, third of the cost, and built in 3 years.
Well, you've painted a very bleak picture, and the truth is we need accurate. If it's ugly, we need to know it's ugly. You talked about having coming up with a plan to resolve this or take these challenges on. What timeline do you think you'll need to be able to put that plan together?
So I'm on day 72 of the job. I am pushing very, very hard to try to have something done in the next 30 to 60 days with a kind of complete kind of idea of where I'm at. It just really depends what else happens and what pops, but I'm working very hard. And again, it's just methodically. I had to go see the shipyards. I had to go see the programs. Now, look.
Well, we just need you to get us information as soon as possible. We're going to try to do the NDA in mid-July. If you want us to help you with that product, you need to try to get us something by then. I yield to the ranking member.
Thanks, And just following up on that, as you know, the chairman and I are working on an acquisition reform process, full committee is. And, you know, when you make those statements about how quickly other places are able to build ships, a lot of it, I think, comes down to regulations and requirements. The requirements process is an endless rotating nightmare that is completely disconnected in many instances from a usable product. And I think we agree with that. I've often made the joke that if I could, I would snap my fingers and eliminate half of all regulations, and I don't care which half. That's probably not a smart way to go about it, but we seem to make no progress on this. So just for all three of you, I'm curious, how would you blow up that regulations process, shrink it down so it stops sucking us into this? And it's not the only problem, I will grant you, but it certainly seems to be really a big part of the problem. Admiral, you want to take the first stab at that?
Hey, sir, thanks for that question. One of the things taking a page out of the Ukraine lessons learned and what's happening with the Houthis is we must go faster. So I think abandoning the idea that we have to have an approved program of record before we proceed is something we have to consider for capabilities like unmanned to get them out faster. So we were working on a legislative that came out for a rapid capabilities office in NavAir, and I asked for that to include the entire Navy. We are going to talk to the Secretary about that, but to me, that thing within the Navy could allow us to deliver capability faster. I acknowledge the tenets of the SPEED Act and the desire to remove holdups there, and I think that that's good. My sense is we're going to need some rigidity to make our traditional platforms, some consistency that allows you to fund and develop things and have confidence in the program, and at the same time, some flexibility to develop unmanned things that we're not wedded to. So we are doing that with PAC Fleet and supporting them, trying to get them a capability by 1 January 2027 for a missionary we call non-traditional sea denial, which is largely unmanned. I think that is a good foreshadow of where we need to go.
Thanks. General Smith, I don't know, or Secretary Fallon, if you want to go first. Thanks,
sir. Sir, I'd echo my shipmate, Admiral Kilby. You know, for an example, drone technology. We can additive manufacture and 3D print drones right now. We're doing it at Quantico. Yep. What we need is the authority to operate them, the authority to train with them. And so being able to do additive manufacturing and 3D printing without relying on a specific vendor to produce something for us is really key. Because I don't want to have to pay a vendor for something that I can do myself.
Yeah, we would love to empower you on that step as part of our reform effort. Mr. Secretary?
So a couple things. One, you know, look, we have the Navy in particular, as you alluded to in your opening statement, we have been deferring maintenance on ships. We have underinvested in our infrastructure. And all those bills are coming due. We are kind of at the end of what we can defer. And that's one of the problems that's going on. So I don't think the Navy's totally to blame, to be honest. The problem also is requirements happen both from the Navy and from this body to some extent.
Yeah.
And people.
We are part of the problem. I readily acknowledge that, and something we need to fix.
Yeah, and we need to really try to get that resolved. I think the other thing, just in the Navy's defense, a lot of these things are brand new. These submarines we're building right now they look a lot like old submarines. They are very different. Same thing with the carriers. So some of the problems we've had is first in class, and the problem is, I think with the Navy, we tend to want to have everything perfect before we start it. And we've got to stop that. We've got to get it in the water, let's iterate, and then make the second and third one better. The other thing is we tend to create multiple classes of things. So take the V-22, I think there's almost 438 of them. We have 70 different varieties of V-22. Okay, now I'm still waiting for the comprehensive report on that to understand it. But to your point, we've got to get the requirements down. We've got to make this simpler. There's one thing when you're building, and it's a business I know very well. It's called schedule. If you don't stay to the schedule, you are going to be over budget and you are going to get killed.
Well, the phrase, the perfect, the enemy of the good, is just, just so emblematic of everything we do on so many different projects and pieces that lead us to that incredibly high cost, and then forget perfect. We don't have anything. It takes forever, and it just spends all of the money. So I applaud those efforts. Look forward to working with you. I yield back. Thanks.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your leadership. And indeed, I'm really grateful to be here with you. Each of you, I'm a Navy dad. As I mentioned to you, my son just retired, Lieutenant Commander at Beaufort Naval Hospital, and just appreciate he glued the Marines back together at Parris Island and at Marine Corps Air Station. And then I'm grateful, too, that my late father-in-law received the Navy Cross as a Marine. He was part of a contingent of Clemson cadets that actually seized Shuri Castle at Okinawa, the castle of the Ryukyu Kingdom. And so we identify. And then I was on ground level. I was, in high school, a Sea Cadet at the Charleston Naval Base. So I particularly appreciate what you do. We appreciate all of you for a strong America through peace, through strength. We are in a Cold War we did not choose, between dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. War criminal Putin, the regime in Tehran, and the Chinese Communist Party continue to modernize their capabilities and rapidly expand what we are forced to react to, and we have changes in the battlefield. President Donald Trump is correct. The Iranian regime must not have a nuclear bomb to achieve their goal of death to Israel, death to America. The U.S. must remain ahead of our adversaries to ensure we do not fall behind, again, with the goal of peace through strength. With that in mind, Mr. Secretary, and also I want to congratulate you. I have a grandson at SMU, junior, okay? So I know your academic background is extraordinary. It's almost as good as the Naval Academy. We are witnessing the unprecedented buildup and modernization of China's military. They're building ships at an alarming rate, and their defensive capabilities continue to expand. What more can be done with sufficient Navy resources to deter or fend off an attack on Taiwan by the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, I'll start, sir, and yield to the Secretary. You know, we've been studying this in the Navy for a long time. We have a global series of war games we conduct at Newport at the Navy War College, and we have very experienced commanders like Admiral Paparo and Admiral Kaler, who their responsibility is to work this. There are 5 areas we are focused on in the Navy: long-range fires, counter C-5 ISRT, which is being able to counter the Chinese ability to track us, terminal defense of our ships, because we've got to be able to defend them, and contested logistics. The last area is this area called non-traditional sea denial, and that came out of study and thought from Admiral Paparo when he was the Pac Fleet Commander, that we needed to make Taiwan a very difficult target to take. So we're investing in those. We're experimenting in those. I was, several weeks ago, I was out in San Diego with Admiral Kaler and Admiral Paparo as they were working some of these technologies together to deliver them at pace. So I think the Navy views ourselves as a central point for Admiral Paparo, who is the combatant commander responsible for this, to prevent that from happening, and we are focused on it.
Well, I want to thank you because indeed it's peace through strength and protect the people of Taiwan. And then hopefully the Chinese Communist Party see the unintended consequence, of my view, of failures by war criminal Putin, which is strengthened NATO. Who would imagine with Finland and Sweden now being members? But aside from that, Germany going to 5%. So truly the Communist Party needs to see that an invasion of Taiwan would be catastrophic. And then General Smith, in your testimony, you mentioned the lessons learned from war criminals Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and, for example, with the UAVs. How is the Marine Corps preparing?
Well, Congressman, thanks for that. What we know is if you can be sensed, you can be targeted, and if you can be targeted, you can be killed. So first you have to have a lower signature going in. You have to mimic or be able to cancel out your own signature to hide in plain sight. And that's something that we're working on very, very hard. You also have to be able to protect yourself against drone technology. So our counter-drone technology basically our MRIC, our medium-range intercept capability, other counter-drone technologies that we're working on. That is key to being able to protect our Marines on the ground, wherever they may be in the Pacific or be it in the EUCOM AOR.
Thank you all for your great service. And one point too, at Parris Island, I was there, and to see young people talking to their family members saying, "I'm the slug and human debris you sent here." You changed personnel very well. Thank you.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again to all three witnesses for your testimony this morning. Secretary Phelan, I want to publicly thank you for releasing the wage improvement funds for submarine workers that Congress authorized and funded last December. Those funds, which were released on April 30th, made a critical difference to settle the Marine draftsmen's contract impasse, as well as boost the wage rates of metal trades workers in southern New England by 30% over a 5-year span. This wage increase for our shipbuilders is going to create the separation in terms of the labor market to make sure that these jobs bring in new hires as well as retain workers, which again, Admiral Rucker did some amazing work in terms of analyzing that issue last year. And again, the timing of your decision, as I said, made a critical difference. I also want to point to your testimony, pages 13 and 14, where you gave very vigorous support for AUKUS. And echoed actually Admiral Paparo when he testified here a few weeks ago about, again, the advantages to the U.S. In terms of AUKUS. Your testimony walked through the joint training that's happening right now between our two navies, as well as joint training in terms of shipyard workers from Australia, Guam, and Hawaii, which again is going to, I think, enhance, not burden, U.S. readiness. I was wondering if you could talk about that for a second.
Congressman, thank you for the question. Yeah, look, submarines are our critical asymmetric advantage, and obviously Australia and the United Kingdom are our closest allies, and in particularly in the undersea domain. My immediate concern as Secretary of the Navy is to improve our submarine production rate and our maintenance throughput so that we can make sure that we are meeting all of our commitments, our internal commitments, and then any future AUKUS commitments. But I need to do that without making sure we're sacrificing any combat capability for the combatant commanders that we need in the Western Pacific.
Having said that, I mean, I think that as you and I discussed when you were in Groton, again, there were 2 delivered last year. New Jersey and Iowa. There are going to be 2 delivered this year, Massachusetts and Idaho, and there'll be 2 delivered the following year, Arkansas and Utah. Again, but as your testimony stated, you know, really the advantages of AUKUS, which Admiral Paparo emphatically stated also, is that it actually enhances our position in the Indo-Pacific, creating an Indian Ocean rotation out of Perth. Again, as well as getting deeper collaboration, which is critical to the Indo-Pacific. So again, I would encourage you, again, to sort of continue, obviously, working with Congress. We authorized the AUKUS powers in 2023. There's strong interest, bipartisan interest on this committee. And again, I think the investment by Australia of $500 million into our industrial base, which we had to pass a law to allow that to actually happen, again, shows that this is clearly a bilateral commitment between the 2 countries. Admiral Kilby, you, again, walked through the combat surge readiness for the different parts of the Navy. As far as submarines, which, again, is part of the inventory question that the Secretary was mentioning as far as AUKUS is concerned, the number is 72%. It's not where we want it to be. We want it to be at 80%. But I remember well when Admiral Houston took over at Naval Reactors in January 2024, it was at 60%. So clearly the public yards like Portsmouth and others are really stepping up their game, and we're seeing that number move in the right direction. Isn't that correct?
It is, sir, but I'm not satisfied. I think there's work to be done here. I don't mean to be, negative about it, but I'm focused on 80%, and you have to have an audacious goal to change people's behavior. And so my belief is we've got some efficiencies we can get at. I think there's some focus we can apply to both submarines and aircraft carrier production and workers, and we can really empower that worker and take barriers away, the same barriers that we talked about.
But I just remind you, this committee, was ahead of the curve in terms of getting SIOP money so that these public yards can finally belatedly, get the capacity to get those boats moving out, and it's happening in real time, as anyone visits Portsmouth can see vividly. And again, we all want to be at 80%. The point is that the trend is certainly heading in the right direction compared to where it was really just a year and a half ago.
Sir, I'm in a violent agreement with you, and I'm still on the case.
Okay.
We have 17 boats that are in some kind of availability, and my target's 10.
Thank you. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses today, Admiral Kilby, Secretary Phelan, General Smith. Thanks again. Thanks for the incredible job you're doing. Gentlemen, I want to begin with submarines. We had a hearing last week with leadership in the Navy. I was assured that we would not repeat the budget request from FY25. We only requested one Virginia-class submarine. I look forward to a request coming over this year that will, at the minimum, request two. We know where we are. Mr. Courtney pointed out where we are as far as ASUBO, operational availability of submarines. I still want to get a perspective on where we are with the number of submarines. Admiral Kilby, is the requirement still 66 attack submarines?
It is, sir.
Are we anywhere close to that at this point?
We are not.
Do we still have the plan to recondition some 688s to repower them to help us get closer to that number?
Yes, sir, we do.
Secretary Phelan, I know that you've talked a lot about the importance of submarines. It is the one significant strategic advantage that we have over the Chinese, and we know, too, the AUKUS agreement is incredibly important. Will you commit to work with Congress to make sure that we are getting as quickly as we can to producing 2 Virginia-class a year, 1 Columbia-class per year, with the goal of producing 2.3 Virginia-class submarines per year in order to meet not only our requirement, but also the requirement we've committed to under AUKUS?
Congressman, thanks for the question. I know it's important to you. Obviously, our submarine production...
Well, it's important to the nation, too, so not just to me.
I understand. Look, our submarines, as I said, are critical. That's why it's the first yard I went to and where I spent the most time. We are committed to getting to our production rates up, to getting us what we need. So, yes, you have that commitment.
Let me jump over, Secretary, to carrier production, another important part of that. We know the span of platforms is going to be key. I want to make sure that we are all here on the same page as far as the importance of a long lead time material purchase, especially for things like CVN 82. I've been assured that we are on track to be able to do that. This year, I think, needs to be that first step in that direction. And we know when we bought 2 carriers at a time, when we bought 80 and 81, we know how much money we saved in doing that. We know what it does to provide certainty to the industrial base. We know that we have to do the same, I believe, with CVN 82 and 83. Will you commit to working with this committee to make sure we keep our aircraft carrier production on track with the same efficiency and scheduling that we've been able to achieve with CVN 80 and 81, as we will, hopefully, with the path for CVN 82 and 83?
Congressman, thanks for the question. Look, carrier strike is a cornerstone to our naval power, and it's necessary for the current and all future fights. I would say that what we are doing right now, and we do have some issues with 80 and 81 that we are working on as we speak to try to make sure that the schedule is on time. We are looking at the entire force and trying to understand manned, unmanned, both in air, sea, and undersea, and what is the right balance,
Sure.
and what is the right way to kind of have that work. And so we continue to look at that. As I will say to you, the carriers are quite important to the force and force structure, and we are. I look forward to working with you as that posture review gets done.
Thank you. Admiral Kilby, I want to now focus on amphibs. We know that Congress has been very laser focused on that by setting a floor of 31 operational amphibs, also making sure we have a maintenance plan that allows us to achieve a persistent 3.0 ARG-MU presence. We've known in the last 3 requests in AFRICOM, we haven't been able to meet the crisis response request that's come out with our amphibs. In the Navy's latest update, in the update it states 3.0 ARGMU presence is not a requirement. That's pretty interesting when Congress says that the 31 floor is a requirement and that we require a maintenance plan to achieve 3.0. Why does the Navy characterize the 3.0 ARGMU presence as optional?
I don't mean it to characterize it as optional. I want to maximize the availability of our amphibious ships, and I've done poorly in that, particularly in WASP and Boxer deployments. So I'm committed to getting our amphibious maintenance done on time so the Marines can embark and we can deploy as scheduled for the global force management process. Our shipbuilding numbers, as you know, come from force structure assessments which are derived in our shipbuilding plan. And the shipbuilding plan that we have maintained has been 31. My estimate is I need the 46 amphibious ships.
Gentleman's time
to
expired.
get
Chair now
3.0.
recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Phelan, I was impressed and quite pleased by your testimony, both written and oral today, and your focus on the industrial base, the ability of America to build ships, to repair ships, and the focus that you have. I was hoping that my colleague, Mr. Kelly, would be here as I spoke and bring to your attention the SHIPS Act, which is the implementation of the President's executive order about about our industrial base, military industrial base, and the maritime industrial base. I look forward to working with you on the implementation of that. There are multiple ways in which that will have to be carried out, but the essence of the SHIPS Act is to rebuild our commercial maritime base, and in doing so, enhance the ability of the naval shipbuilding to be done. So we got a lot of work out ahead of us. I would ask for your support and any ideas and suggestions you have about the SHIPS Act. We expect to move it this year. Maybe we'll get it done, but it does have bipartisan and bicameral support. So with that having been said, one of the challenges that the SHIPS Act will address is the contested logistics challenge. It's pretty clear right now that we do not have the capability of maintaining our fleet in the Western Pacific through a long period of time because we do not have the logistical support available. To achieve that, the SHIPS Act goes a long way, but there's another piece to it, and that is the use of the Jones Act fleet as an opportunity to provide the necessary logistical maritime support. We are moving this along. We would look at the Jones Act fleet and develop a program in which some of those ships, for example, tankers, and roll-on, roll-offs would be built to military specifications. Going to have to put a little bit of DOD money into it to achieve that, but then those ships would be available like the aircraft in the CRAFT program. So I draw your attention to that as a solution to meet the necessary logistical support, not only in the Pacific, but also in other parts of the world. Now, are you willing to work with us on these two areas? First of all, the SHIP Act and the implementation of the executive order, and finally the use of the Jones Act fleet as a backstop for the logistic support that the Navy will need.
Thank you, Congressman, for the question, and I know it's an issue important to you and that you spent time on. Look, I think the SHIPS Act has a lot of great aspects to it, and we have given some of our comments in on it, so I think it is critical to helping us with the maritime industrial base. In terms of commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding, it is something the Chinese do very, very well. And we need to start thinking about that more and more in terms of how we modify commercial ships and with military issues in mind. So it is something we are spending time on and looking at and trying to get better ideas of how to do it. Because I think, as Admiral Paparo likes to say, it's how many holes in the ground can you get? And we are trying to make sure we can optimize that. And if a conflict does take place, commercial and logistic ships will be very, very important to that effort.
There's an example next to you with the Marine Corps, who have found that some of the offshore support vessels for the petroleum industry can be modified and used immediately by the Marine Corps. I'll let that stay there. Admiral Kilby, you knew I was going to go here, and that has to do with that how do we make sure that the ships that are supposed to be going into availability are prepared for that availability, that the status, the capability of the ships are known before they even arrive at the repair facility.
I'll just use one brief example, recognizing where we are in time. But USS America is going to go into availability. She has 191 open and inspect actions that were originally planned for the availability. We've pulled that left and are working with the fleet commander to do those open inspects early so we can properly inform the package.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Really appreciate your time. Earlier this year, the U.S. Navy announced the future Bethesda-class expeditionary medical ship will be named the USNS Portsmouth. This modernized vessel will deliver life-saving capabilities, sailing faster than both the Mercy and the Comfort, while providing world-class forward-deployed medical care wherever needed. Admiral Kilby, would you describe how these advanced medical vessels are essential to Navy Medical Corps' ability to deliver care in the time of conflict, and how this ship will factor into the distributed maritime operations concept?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. I've been involved with this effort for some number of years, really excited about the medical community running at this and working to get involved in the requirements process, and they worked faster than most. This vessel is a Roll 2 care vessel, so realizing we have 2 hospital ships, we wanted to increase the density of our ships to be able to respond to massive casualties. So we're really good at medevacs of 1, 2, 3 sailors. We said, what if we have 50 sailors in the water? How do we respond to that? And this ship is a response to that action. So it really gets at the contested logistics problem, and we need to continue to work for solutions like that. But I'm optimistic about this ship and what it will do for us, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know there's some challenges, especially this year with the budget, with the shipbuilding capacity, but I do think it's important, like you do as well, and I think especially when you're looking at the Indo-PACOM theater, it's critical. With the continually emerging threats in Indo-PACOM, we must possess unmanned undersea capabilities that meet the growing need for submerged operational awareness and payload delivery. Growth in the private market is generating new solutions in commercial undersea technology while reducing procurement and operational costs for the military. Secretary Phelan, how is the Navy looking to leverage commercially available unmanned underwater vehicles to meet emerging mission needs and capability gaps? And what can be done to accelerate the fielding of these platforms across the fleet?
Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for the question. Look, we are testing a number of different unmanned platforms, but in the air, on the water, and under the sea. We are definitely pushing very hard with new companies. When I traveled to Indo-PACOM and then came back, I stopped in Los Angeles and spent some time with a big 3D manufacturing company and another company, Anduril, who's doing some things that we're testing. Ceronics, another company that the Navy is testing products with. So, and Saildrone is another one which I met at the Sea Air Space conference here. So we are testing a number of different ones to see, and I think one of the keys, and I think where we need to kind of change in the Navy, again, this comes to a cultural change. We tend to test it, and then if it doesn't work, we're like, next. In the private market, as you know, we iterate. Tell us what's wrong, tell us what's not working, let us try to fix it and make it better. And so this Rapid Technologies Office that the Admiral and I have been talking about is another way of doing that. And I think, look, to be perfectly honest, I think one of the things we need, and I hope the speed legislation covers this, is we need flexibility when it comes to unmanned, because the technology is moving so rapidly. If you look at what happened in the Ukraine and that recent conflict, that was a very different drone than one they had a month ago. And so to be stuck with a program with that platform, we can't have that. So we are going to need more flex when we spend, particularly in unmanned, because of the speed. And so I think the way we procure on unmanned is something that I look forward to working with this committee on and doing that. If there's specific programs, I know Admiral Kilby could address that.
Yes, sir. I think you're absolutely right. I think the companies you mentioned, Anduril, Saronic, people like that, they're ready, they're willing, they want to do this. And I think like we've learned a lot over the last few years with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and what's happening in the Red Sea. We have to get on top of this. This is where the future's at. And, you know, obviously anything we can do from this committee to help, I will be anxious to assist that. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chair.
I thank the gentleman. And Mr. Secretary, I would urge you, I know you've got a lot on your plate, but make sure the folks that are with you that work on acquisition are looking at our SPEED Act, and if there's things that we need to add that aren't in there, it is a product that's still evolving and developing, and I would say the same thing to the General and the Admiral. We want your input. We want this to be meaningful reform that's going to make a difference so we can get after these rapid technological advancements, because you're exactly right. We cannot keep doing things the way we've been doing it and expect to be successful in the future with what you just described. So I ask for your help. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Smith, I've questioned you repeatedly over the past 2 years about what actual progress Marines have made on the ground in the Pacific, putting the theory of force design into practice to meet the China threat. Having recently returned from the Philippines, I was more impressed than I imagined with what your Marines have already achieved. So please keep pressing. General Smith, I also questioned you repeatedly about what the realities are on the ground in Quantico, where you're training the future leaders of the Corps. And I'm concerned that standards have been lowered to keep up graduation numbers. Part of the blame, I know, lies with some of my colleagues here in Congress. So I want to make clear that many of us want you to keep standards high. He is the best who is trained in the severest school, and students who fail should be out, period. General, when the basic school used to require a 20-mile hike, but that has now been reduced 25% to 15 miles, how is that not lowering the standard?
Yeah, Congressman, thanks for that question, and I appreciate your continued advocacy for the basic school. As you know, we produce the most lethal warriors there. We have simply modified our standard. When I went through the basic school, we conducted a 25-mile McCrest hike, carrying full kit, carrying a base plate, a bipod.
I understand, General, but here's my problem. The McCree standard in the fleet is still 20 miles with 70 pounds.
Right.
So you're training, you're asking Marine leaders to meet a standard below what they'll have, what Lance Corporals and PFCs they'll lead in the fleet have to meet.
Well, what I would say, Congressman, is most of the officers coming out of the fleet, coming out of TBS are not infantry officers. Those that are infantry officers will go on to the infantry officer course, where, as you know, the standards are incredibly high.
Right, but if you're a logistics officer assigned to an infantry battalion, you still have to march with the battalion, right?
You do.
So, General, have you graduated any officers from TBS who failed to make the 15-mile hike?
We have not, sir.
Okay, I've heard that's not the case from basic school students themselves when I had lunch with them back in February, so please take confirmation of that for the record.
Will do.
General Smith, do you still believe the Marine Corps philosophy of train how we fight?
I do.
So I checked with the Marines in the Pacific, and they don't have ice baths to cool off when you get hot. We didn't have them in Iraq either. So why is that luxury afforded to officers at TBS at every hike break?
Well, what I would say, Congressman, is we want to train smarter, not harder.
Well, do they understand that their Marines will not have that in the fleet?
They do understand that, but if I have that ability to provide that additional care, then I'm going to do that to make.
I just want to make sure they're trained to a warfighting standard.
They are warfighting focused, I guarantee you, Congressman.
I don't believe that the Chinese Army has ice baths. Now, the Corps is proud of making its numbers when every other service has failed, but top-line numbers are only as good as the Marines who make them up. So that's why I want to make sure you feel the pressure from this committee to keep up those standards. Admiral Kilby, if you were defending the Taiwan Strait, what would you rather have, one aircraft carrier or $13 billion worth of unmanned systems?
It's a hard question to answer without qualifying questions, but if I could put those drones on Taiwan, I'd put them on Taiwan.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Many admirals have not answered that question the same way, but I'll tell you, every junior officer that I've asked this question of, and I ask this question a lot, has said what you just did. which is we'd rather take that $13 billion aircraft carrier money and put it towards unmanned systems.
I did have a qualifier, though.
I get it. We don't have time for all the qualifiers. But General Smith, drones are now responsible for over 70% of casualties in Ukraine, more than any other weapon system combined. What portion of the Marine Corps budget is spent on unmanned systems?
I can't give you an exact number, but it is a small percentage.
I've been told it's 2%. So if the goal is lethality, and that's 70% of lethality in Ukraine, how much more lethal would the Marine Corps be if you doubled that to a mere 4%?
Yeah, we would obviously be more lethal.
And how much time does each lieutenant at TBS spend taking out targets with drones?
I'll have to get back to you on that with an exact answer, but
Okay.
the answer is limited.
It's limited. How much time does each lieutenant spend taking out targets with rifles?
Multiple hours.
Yeah, several weeks of training on the
But
rifle
as you
range.
know, sir, every Marine's a rifleman. That's our creed.
Right, and I love rifles. Rifles were also invented in the 15th century. Look, horses are still great animals too. I just wonder whether we should have more horses at Camp Pendleton than we have drones at TBS. We've got to aggressively make sure that our warfighters are prepared for the future fight. And the future fight is today, when in Ukraine, 70% of casualties are with drones. So I want to see those Marine lieutenants out there getting drones on target as much or more as they're doing that with their rifles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Admiral Kilby, can drones provide an airfield anywhere in the world that provides a strike group of U.S. sovereign airfield like a carrier can, like we just did against the Houthis? Can drones give you that capability that an aircraft carrier to have a sovereign airfield in foreign lands where we may not have friends? Can it provide that capability?
No, it cannot.
Okay, thank you. And General Smith, rifles were invented a long time. I just got a Mississippi rifle given to me for my retirement. But it is a percussion cap, 58 caliber rifle ball that you can load 2 times in 3 minutes. That is 19th century technology. Would you agree the firearms that we have today are not 15th or 16th century capabilities?
Yes, sir, our M16s are quite modern.
Yeah, I mean, they're lighter, they fire at a rapid rate of fire, you have machine guns and all those things. To your knowledge, can drones by themselves replace Marines and make moral or quick decisions that all the data is not in for on a battlefield, the same that a Marine rifleman can?
No, sir. The individual rifleman and the mind thereof is faster than any computing model.
And I'm all about drones. I believe we need those too, and I believe they're cheap and they're capable, and we've seen that, and we need to use that technology. But it does not replace a thinking individual on the ground who can make decisions that maybe is not in the database. Is that correct?
Sir, that is correct. Only a Marine with a thinking mind can make a moral decision.
And I think that applies to sailors too, Admiral. I know it probably doesn't to Army guys, though, because we're not quite as smart. I do want to thank Mr. Garamendi and Senator Kelly and Senator Young for the SHIPS Act. Secretary Phelan, I met in your office, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the fresh business side that you're bringing to our shipbuilding industry and to our maritime industry as a whole. I hope that we will continue on that path to look ways to more rapidly build ships, to use automated technology or unmanned systems to replace people where we can. I don't think that means replacing all people. But what other ideas do you have to increase the ability other than, and all three of y'all, we have to get a consistent demand signal from the Navy and the Marine Corps of what we need. And the Marine Corps is pretty good. I know how many amphibs you need and LSVs. But we need to be consistent with industry because they cannot continue to adjust. When we say, oh, we want 4 destroyers, no, we just really want 0. No, we want 1. We've got to be consistent. Are y'all committed to give us a consistent demand of what ships we need built?
Hey, sir, I'll start. For the Navy, we want to produce a Navy that we can man, train, and equip and use effectively. And so with the given budget constraints, I'm going to do recommend to the Secretary that that's what we buy. To the extent I can do that with consistency, I exactly and agree with you wholeheartedly. And I understand the impact and the demand signal on industry, but I feel a commitment to the Secretary to make sure we're manned, trained, and equipped. Those are the readiness accounts, and the Secretary referred to that I want to make sure are solvent so we can employ the Navy the way we want to do. So there's a little bit of a push-pull there. I'm not trying to be cute with you. I am trying to say we need a bigger Navy, and it needs to be manned, trained, and equipped to do what it needs to do.
And with that, I know we've spoken at length about this, so I won't delay that. Tell me, though, I think Congressman Moulton had a great point on where we do need to replace men and women with machines, especially in hostile environments. In what way can we use USVs or all the unmanned systems, whether subsurface, on the surface, or drones in the air? In what ways can we use those to complement our Marines and Navy across the world? What plans do we have to use as many unmanned systems as we can?
Well, I'll start with that. I answered that question. It's non-traditional sea denial, specifically focused for Admiral Paparo and Admiral Kaler in the near term. But they don't replace the legacy platforms we need. It's a combination. And we need to work with the Secretary on a vision for a hybrid fleet, which has both of those moving forward, but I'll yield to the Commandant.
Yes, sir. We're exercising and practicing with some big wing drones, our MQ-9s, our other drone technologies, but they are complementary of the manned fleet. They're complementary of our F-35s. They're a loyal wingman. They don't replace a manned aircraft.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, before we move on from this, Mr. Kelly was asking an important question, and I've stated in here repeatedly, and I can't emphasize this enough, budget can't drive policy. Policy has to drive budget. When General Kelly asks you about the numbers you need to tell us what the numbers you need to meet the threat. And if the budget will only allow you to achieve part of that number, then tell us that and put the balance in your unfunded requirements list. It is our job to find you the money. It is your job to define what you need to meet the threat. And I just really am frustrated by the fact that presidents, both parties, give us budgets that show us what they would like to do. That it just informs us. It does not limit us. I know it limits you, but we still need you to tell us what you need. And I think that's what General Kelly was getting after in that question. So that understand there's what's in the budget request, and then there's the UFR list. We look at that UFR list as being the balance of what you said you need. So I'm sorry to take that time, but I do want to drive that point home. Thank you. And with that, I'll recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
I would like to just, if you could, comment on another area of concern and competition that we have with China and with Russia in particular. And we have the opportunity to work more with our allies, particularly our European allies in this respect. And that's what's happening in the Arctic. There's other programs outside the Navy, national science programs that have been cut that deal with, for instance, issues. The Office of Polar Programs is one, but they're dealing with a lot of the research issues that are necessary a component to us being competitive in these areas. So I want to ask, has the Navy undertaken those things is it duplicative? Is the Navy getting that kind of research that it needs in the Arctic areas? What are we doing? How are we cooperating with our allies in this regard? And what competition do we have? I know it's an area more and more that we must stay competitive with. So I don't know which of you would like to address that.
Secretary, if I could, I'll start and yield to you. We are interested in the Arctic. We do every 2 years a exercise in the Arctic called ICEX, which is primarily focused on our undersea platforms, submarines in particular. But over the past, I would say 5 years, we've been pushing our strike groups farther north because we want to have that capability. So, and working finally with the Coast Guard and NAVSEA on the development of their Cutter program. So I do think there's increased activity. I am concerned about it. We are pushing north to operate there more.
What do we have for assets? So really, only a couple, really.
Well, we're restricted, we are, sir, absolutely. But we're restricted, as you know, on times a year we can push up there. But we want to the extent we can push our strike groups up there and our amphibious readiness groups, we want to have that capability.
What does Russia have for assets? It's amazing. The disparity is a concern.
Yes, sir, concur.
So I think that's an area with everything else, but it's an increasing area of competition and interest because of the great reserves that are there, as well as some efforts by China and Russia in terms of navigation constraints in that area. And so I think it's, with everything else going on in the world, I think it's something we better pay attention to more. And I think you'll need help from us to do this. We're miserably behind in assets and the availability that we have to compete. So I want to raise that as a concern. But I want to point out what I think is a program that the Navy has and that I think can be a great model. I think it could be expanded within the Navy as a model, but I think it could be used in the other branches. We have in our area, working with the University of Massachusetts, a marine and undersea technology research program that we work jointly. And I think it's a win-win situation. You're using a university. They actually constructed a curriculum for the Navy in conjunction with the Navy where they're training individuals and they're doing research at the same time. And they're concentrating in this instance mostly on unmanned, undersea, autonomous vehicles and everything. But they're learning the robotics, they're doing the research on all of these areas and combine it with ocean research at the same time. But what's actually happened is it's been a great funnel for personnel. The people that are studying here in these grants go in and they serve our country at the end of this so often. So I don't know how familiar you are with that, but how much are you working with universities? I think this program you have can really be transferable to the other branches as well. We have personnel needs, skilled personnel needs, and this is a way to do that and get research at the same time. So maybe you could comment on what you have for conjunction, for what you're doing with universities and research and personnel, and how this kind of program can be duplicated or expanded.
Well, I think it's a great program. We also work with the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Texas. So those programs are super helpful, and I have no pushback on that and agree.
No, I was just wondering if that can be expanded. And I've looked at and had budget hearings with the other branches, and it seems the Navy is ahead of the other branches in utilizing this. So your experience has been, as I described it, one where the research is there, plus it's a portal to get some actually important personnel people as well. So,
yes, sir.
Well, thank you for your work. I hope that can be looked at and duplicated. I think it's really a win-win situation. I yield back.
Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Admiral Kilby, the Navy's pilot shortfall is increasingly concentrated in high-skilled strike fighter and electronic attack pilots. Surveys show aviators want flexible contract terms and more merit-based retention bonuses. What are you doing to improve this issue, and have you seen any progress, and do you need any additional authorities from Congress?
Hey, sir, it's got our attention. It's had our attention for some time. It's not a new issue for us, but I think it's an issue we really have to keep in close control and understand and follow. I am seeing progress. I don't know that I need additional help from you. I do think special pays when we need that, and having the authority to give those special pays is an important tool in the tool bag to maintain and gain those folks to serve our country.
And staying with you, you have 23,000 fewer sailors than needed to man the fleet, and only 89% of the positions were filled as of March. Are you concerned at all with this readiness issue, and what is the Navy doing, not just to recruit, but to restructure how we think about crew models, contractor support, and training pipelines?
Well, I'll try to be brief here, sir. I am concerned about it. It's my number 2 concern behind shipbuilding and ship repair. I am optimistic in where we are with recruiting this year and where we frankly turned around since the mid of 2024. We saw a change in behavior in our structure, and we put a lot of emphasis on it to get after it. And we're in a really reasonably good place. But to your point, 22,950 gaps at sea is a big deal. I think we'll be in a better place at the end of this year. I don't want to go back in the wrong direction of the history, though, where we reduce crew manning and we increase load on the crew. So we've made an adjustment over the last several years where we added 15,000 billets at sea so we can properly man the ships to do the work we have. So I don't want to back off that, and I want to manage it and recruit to make the Navy do what the nation needs it to do.
When you talk to sailors or squadron commanders, what are they telling you they need most?
Well, we're really hurting at the apprentice level now. Those are where the majority of our gaps at sea are. So it takes 9 months to get a recruit through boot camp and to a ship with no additional training. And we're just seeing a turn in that. When I testified, I think 2 months ago, I said the gaps at sea were 23,200. Now we're 22,950, and we're trending in the right direction. And I think we'll be at 18,000 at the end of this year if we stay on pace. So we just need to have the machine do what it needs to do to get sailors through that pipeline to ships to reduce those gaps.
Are you hearing much about pay and incentives or quality of life issues in the service that's driving individuals to leave, possibly?
I can't make that connection. I can tell you that quality of service has our full attention because we feel that we have to treat our sailors like world-class athletes to keep them in the Navy. So the Secretary's focused on barracks, I'm focused on barracks. I'm focused on Wi-Fi. I'm focused on paying people on time. I'm focused on creating an experience for them where they feel valued and do not want to leave.
Okay. Shifting to conventional prompt strike, Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, you can chime in too. Could you all provide an update on the conventional prompt strike, and from your perspective, what could Congress provide to help get this capability to cross the finish line without cutting corners or overloading the industrial base?
Yeah, I'll start. We've had a couple of challenging tests with the Army. We just had a recently successful test. I'm optimistic about the program. We need the program. It has a place in there's a hole in our munitions skill set, below nuclear, where I think this is a critical capability for us. And we'll first field on the Zumwalt class destroyers and then ultimately on submarines. So I'm completely behind it.
Okay, Secretary, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree with everything you said.
Okay, I imagine one of the hardest parts about standing up a program like CPS is navigating the tension between urgency and risk tolerance. At this stage, what's the biggest challenge you're wrestling with internally, whether technical, cultural, or bureaucratically? What would make the biggest difference from our side of the House?
I will have to take that question for the record and get with Vice Admiral Wolf. I'm tracking it with him, and I don't know of a specific thing to give you, but I'll take the question for the record and come back to you, sir.
Fair enough. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your testimony, gentlemen. I'm going to pull a little bit on Representative Moulton's line of questioning, which regarded sort of the balance between lethality as defined by physicality and lethality as defined by modern warfare and modern technology. We all recognize, and I've been supportive of the fact that physical endurance and combat readiness are foundational to the military, and that people should adhere to the standards that we have formed for them, regardless of who they are. Today's battlefield, however, increasingly requires new forms of expertise that Mr. Moulton mentioned a few of, including cyber operations and drone piloting and advanced data analysis. So the traditional view of lethality has certainly evolved. That traditional view of being physical strength and kinetic capability has to expand, in my opinion, to include technological proficiency and cognitive dominance as well. So in this conversation that we've collectively been having about the importance of lethality, which again I support wholeheartedly, how would you think, or do you think, about the evolution of the definition of lethality is for the individual troop? And can you please define what you think modern lethality is? And I'll ask General Smith to talk about that first.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for that question. So every Marine is a rifleman. So when it comes down to it, it ultimately comes down to one Marine versus an adversary. After all the drones are expended, after all the artillery rounds are fired and all the ordnance is expended off of our aircraft, it comes down to one rifleman looking down the rifle sights at another rifleman. And that is who we are as a Marine Corps. That's fundamental to who we are.
So even now, in a modern warfare environment where we're talking about drones on drones, you would boil it down to the rifle.
I would, ma'am. Every Marine is a rifleman. That's our ethos. It's fundamental to who we are. It doesn't mean that we don't prioritize drones, because we used to shoot a few thousand meters. Now we're shooting tens of thousands.
Understood, understood.
But it's an ethos.
And so as long as that person is capable of being an effective rifle person, you believe that they are lethal?
They are. As long as they can hit their target at 500 meters with iron sights, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Admiral, any comments on what modern lethality is defined as?
Yes, ma'am, thanks for the question. A couple things a little bit different. The Navy is a little bit different than Marine Corps in this regard. We're a highly technical service where sailors are trained to do specific things. So I'd say at a base level, just like the Marine Corps, we want to optimize human performance. That means sleep, understanding where they're at, care for them, all that. 3 bags full. We need to do even better at that as far as making sure leaders are engaged with their troops and understand where they are from a wellness perspective. So I'm all over that. Break. The next piece is that all those individual sailors are trained, current, and proficient in their task. That task can be many things. I could be shooting a Tomahawk. I could be defending the ship with a Standard missile. I could be a quartermaster taking a fix. I could be a CS preparing meals. Optimizing their performance in that regard is what I consider lethality.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You know, the person, when I served active duty, my job was to make sure I helped design what amounts to Iron Dome at this point in time. And I was lethal because I was able to be effective in doing that job. And so we each have a different job. And what I would argue lethality is, as much as anything, is making sure that we are optimized as a force, that we are individually doing the thing that we were tasked to do. And I think that's one of the places where we get ourselves caught up on the physicality of things is not always what makes us the most lethal as a body and as a force. I'm going to move on in what remains of my questions. The last question that I have for you has to do with barracks. I'm on the Military Personnel Subcommittee, the ranking member, and also was the ranking member on the Quality of Life Committee. You talked appropriately about the importance of your barracks initiative. The Army, unfortunately, has diverted $1 billion of resources that were supposed to be allocated for barracks to the southern border. Would you please commit to me that you are not planning on doing that with any of the moves that you are doing to the Los Angeles area with your Marines?
Yes, ma'am. I'm committed to improving the quality of life of our Marines. I'm committed to spending every dollar that's appropriated to us for the purpose for which it was appropriated, and that includes Barracks 2030, which is our most consequential barracks investment in our history.
Thank you. And since I have 20 seconds left, can you tell me what happened with the airplanes falling off the ships and whether or not heads rolled as a result?
Ma'am, there are 4 investigations ongoing on the Truman Strike Group right now. None of those are released. I'm committed to letting that process happen and conducting actions as appropriate, and then reporting back to the committee when those are complete.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, General Bacon.
Thank you to all three of you being here. Thank you for your leadership. I appreciate you being here today. My first question is to Admiral Kirby and General Smith. What is the #1 capability that you're lacking right now for a fight with China, which is our pacing threat? What's the gaps that this committee here can help fill? Admiral Kirby.
I'd say munitions are the thing that, in the top 3 that bother me. Ship repair and shipbuilding, those are things that Secretary and I are after to improve. I don't know that I need more help from you in that regard. Recruiting and manning, that's the second thing. I think we're on pace to do that. I don't think I can get more help from you. But munitions, we have to turn the tide here if we're going to be in protraction. So preferred munition production, as well as second-tier and third-tier vendors that may be able to compete in that space that we haven't been open to in the past. I think we ought to be open to that consideration and get help from you if needed to do so.
I think that's good insight because we see in Ukraine, they're burning munitions faster than anybody can build them. General Smith.
Yeah, I would concur with my shipmate Admiral Kilby. Munitions are key. And for us, mobility is key. You know, we have to get to the fight, we have to be able to maneuver in the fight, and we have to be able to strike at range. So advanced long-range weapon systems are key to us.
Thank you. Admiral Kirby, Ukraine attained sea supremacy in the Black Sea without really a Navy. What are the lessons learned for the U.S. Navy?
Well, it's a different, a little bit of a, there are lessons to be learned there, and I think the commitment to get to a hybrid fleet and learning to use unmanned more effectively is a path we're on. We're in a little bit of a different place because we're not, now, we will, with Homeland Defense is our number one thing, but where I tend to think of our Navy deployed forward to bring effects to bear, I've got a sustainment piece, an employment piece, a deployment piece for those vehicles. So I do want to learn those lessons, and we're applying them in the context of non-traditional sea denial that I explained earlier. I do think there's a coupling of traditional assets, manned planes and unmanned aircraft, manned ships and unmanned ships that we need to explore and really diversify our fleet to have it be capable.
Yeah, it's worth thinking through because the nature of the fight is changing. Secretary Phelan, there was a bad report on Naval Air Station Key West. How focused is the Navy Department on ensuring we have good family housing?
Thank you for that question, Congressman. So I have ordered the Navy to review all of our barracks after what I saw at Guam, which was appalling to me. Those sailors and Marines have been moved out of the building they were in and put into a new building, new barracks that was built. So we are in the middle of that review. I'm waiting to get the results of that. And then I will be going out to Key West as well to look at that. The Marines beat the Navy to the punch on this and have been reviewing barracks, I think, for about the last year or two, and are in the middle of modernizing those. I saw some at Camp Lejeune that are getting updated because some of the ones they're in are also not really good, and that needs to change. So I look forward to sharing that with the committee as soon as I get that report done. And to your prior question on ways, on munitions and ways you could help, one thing I would also say is we are going to have to, in our contracting, own our IP. We pay for a lot of our IP, and we get hung up by the big primes saying, well, we need to fix it because we own the IP, or we're not going to give you that IP.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't, and we need to really change that.
If I may follow up, the GAO gave us a failing score in barracks, all the departments on barracks and dormitories. We had a report a couple of weeks ago saying that Secretary of Defense had moved out about $1 billion out of barracks into other needs. But yeah, we got a failing grade in dorms, and you just touched on Guam and some other places. Have you seen money being moved out of the Navy's accounts to support dormitories or barracks?
I have not.
Okay.
No, sir. We're still fully committed to Barracks 2030.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Just let you know we got our eyes on it, even though there's mixed feedback I'm getting. I wanted to ask you a question on the Slickum briefly. I think it provides us a lot of options. How are we doing with the Slickum N deployment or production?
So we're committed to Slickum N. I think we had some questions in other hearings about platforms, which platforms. I think initially my opinion is a submarine is the initial platform to deliver that, and we're committed to the program to deliver it on the schedule of 2034. There may be some options to look at some interim capability, and we look forward to exploring those as well.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back my -5 seconds.
Gentleman yields back, Chair, and I recognize Mr. Golden of Maine.
Thank you. Admiral Kilby, you've consistently testified before the committee about the Flight 3 DDG delivering capabilities of important need to the fleet, specifically the radar, which is going to be key to anti-air and ballistic missile defense. One assumes this remains a high priority in places like the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, or South China Sea. Do you agree with that?
I agree completely, sir.
And the Navy's shipbuilding plan envisions 23 Flight 3 ships. You currently have one in the fleet, correct?
Well, yes, sir. One is about ready to deliver.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, the pending reconciliation bill includes 2 DDG Flight 3s. Congressional intent was pretty clear that these would result in a 3-ship cadence in FY26 and FY27. I'm now hearing behind the scenes that the plan that we don't have yet, complete plan from you, is going to goose egg the DDG program in your request for FY26. So I've been on the committee for 6 years, and I've heard from the Navy consistently a desire that the 2 DDG yards achieve a 1.5 ship per year rate of production. But here you're signaling demand that would not support that rate of production. So do you envision paying these yards to build ships? Or, I'm sorry, I'll rephrase that, to not build ships? Or do you expect these yards to achieve a 1.5 ship production rate only to then turn around and lay shipbuilders off?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Look, the President and I are committed to national defense and are committed to shipbuilding. As it relates to the budget, look, we are working very closely with the OSD and the OMB on this as we speak, basically daily. And so we have a good idea of what we need and don't need, and that is. And I don't want to get in front of the President on that, and I know he'll be coming out with a budget soon, but I think shipbuilding will fare quite well in that budget.
Shipbuilding, yes, but I'm talking about destroyers.
Yeah, I can't go into specifics with you right now, Congressman, but I understand the question. I think, we are at the end of line on the current destroyers and looking at DDGX. As I said before, we're looking at the whole force and trying to understand what the whole force posture should be in terms of what we're learning and what's going on and how we should be structured in effect. And destroyers are an important component of that.
Yes. Across the country we have skilled shipbuilders, but they are aging. And every yard is trying to bring in new shipbuilders to train them up to have the skills that they need to build the best, most quality, most lethal Navy that this country needs. On this committee, we have found through studies which we partnered with the Navy to do, that it takes on average 7 years to develop a high asset, fully skilled Navy shipbuilder. So this rate, the signal, the consistency of the signal demand from the Navy, and then to actually deliver on acquiring at that rate is key to not only developing that workforce, taking 7 years to get them there, maintaining them. And you cannot build a future DDGX without shipbuilders.
I agree with you, and I have more ships than our shipyards can handle for the next 10 years, whether it's a destroyer, whether it's a tanker, whether it's an oiler, whether it's a submarine. So I am not worried about the demand signal we have. It is getting those workers and getting them trained. It is there, and I think it's incenting the private sector to help us as well. So this is as I said, it's really going to be a whole of government approach. I think the demand signal, as Congressman Courtney mentioned, which we recently did.
I hear it. What I'm speaking to is a consistent concern that has been raised that these 2 yards get to a 1.5 ship per year production rate when you're not actually then demanding that rate, which will inevitably lead to ups and downs, to bathtubs in the workforce where you are hiring people, training people, and then laying people off. What we are asking for is simply consistency. And it's just as important as how big the Navy you want to have and how quickly you want to get there. You're not going to maintain the best shipbuilders in the world if they don't think it's a consistent career. And you need their skills and assets. And I would ask for you to give that some deep thought.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the witnesses for coming today. Secretary, I think we're all elated and relieved that there has been in the news of the turnaround with recruiting. What I'd love to ask is, can you talk a little bit about the targeted goal and where we're at and compare that to last year, and then more importantly, drill down to the foundational reasons why there has been a turnaround. And you may not know exactly that right yet, but was it messaging and advertising? Was it changes in the recruiting approach? Was it changes at the top, in the chain of command? Was it increased access? And then if you could do a deep dive and come back and share with us, because whatever we're doing right, I want to learn the lessons from that and keep doing it.
I'll let Admiral Kilby give you the specific numbers as to where we sit there. My view is I think that We have, and we are repositioning our branding. I think the Marines do an excellent job in terms of branding and recruiting.
They were the only ones that always hit their goals.
That is correct. And so we have begun, and I think there's a reason why. They put some of their best officers in recruiting jobs. So they've made it a priority and made it important. That is something we are looking to do with the Navy as well, which is prioritizing recruiting, making it more important, saying this is critical. I think one of the reasons we've gotten the bump, to be honest, is I think the president's election definitely brought a pop, and we've seen a pop in the numbers. And I think that I can't take you through that math.
Sure, but I'd just like to have a deep dive to know, because I want to be getting in doubts and uncertainties. Whatever the reasons for the recruiting, the success, we just need to keep doing it, or make us aware of it in the public as well. Admiral?
Yeah, we'll generate a report and send it to you, sir. I do think it is a large number of factors, and I welcome all of them to do what we need to do to bring the folks in the Navy. We did have a change in leadership. We elevated the position of the recruiting command commander. We changed our daily and visual management to look at it every day. We took away monthly goals and said, just bring in everyone you can. We were more thoughtful about medical waivers. We were being very conservative to not bring someone in who might have a problem, and we made a judgment call based on that desire to serve and the fact that we could take care of those sailors. So I think there's a ton of things that happen there. But I'm focused on it every day, not every month.
Well, great, because it was all hands on deck, and that's what we needed. And you want to talk about any kind of weapon systems, we don't have human beings to operate them. They're worthless. And on that note, Admiral, is there any specific shortfalls as far as in, let's say, cyber medical subs that you're still experiencing?
Yeah, there are some areas we're challenged on. Medical people is a challenge for us. And there's a few other areas. I think we're actually in a pretty good shape for nuclear sailors to come in, both officer and enlisted. That's an area we've been challenged before. So I can get back to you on the specifics.
Could you, and how about with cyber? How are we doing with cyber?
Cyber, from a recruitment or a training perspective, sir?
Both.
Okay, for recruitment, I think we're okay. It's an exciting mission and people feel fulfilled when they come to it. Meeting the demands of the cyber comm as far as training offensive and defensive teams, we're good defense. We got some work to do on offense.
Awesome, thank you. In general, I wanted to talk to you about, it's clear that the biggest threat we have is peer adversary, China, Indo-Pacific. And, when I look at Okinawa, and we had 19,000 Marines in Okinawa, and then there's a plan in place and that's commencing to reduce that to 10. And it would make sense to me, considering sitting on this committee and also on the Intel committee, to do everything we can to keep those Marines on Okinawa and not only not be decreasing the number, but increasing that number, considering the threat that's there, and we all think about and talk about Taiwan. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and what can we do? I, in general, would love to have a meeting and do whatever we can do on this committee, being the chair, the subcommittee chair on military personnel, to help mitigate whatever political things we'd have to talk about with our Japanese allies and partners. But I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Well, Congressman, what I would say is President Trump and Prime Minister Shiba confirmed the vital importance of the steady implementation of the realignment of U.S. forces in Japan at their February summit. I agree with Admiral Paparo that currently Marine Corps forces in the First Island chain are optimized, and that my best military advice is that any change to that optimized laydown increases risk. So again, we are currently optimized as we stand now, and any change to that optimization increases risk to the O-plans and increases risk to the combatant commander.
Gentleman's time's expired, Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Admiral Kirby, General Smith, Secretary Phelan, thank you for being here. I represent San Diego, so I look forward to this hearing every year. Obviously, the Marines and Navy are integral to my community, and I wish that I was able to spend my 5 minutes asking you about childcare and housing and shipbuilding and how we could make our Navy and Marine Corps everything we need for the war of the future. But unfortunately, because of President Trump's deployment of 700 active duty Marines into Los Angeles over the objections of local officials, I will be asking about that instead. So General Smith, first, I'd like to ask you about training. I know it's never standard practice to train Marines in crowd control and non-lethal engagement. I've spoken to folks at OneMEF. I saw your testimony yesterday for the Senate Armed Services Committee, in which you said that all 700 Marines currently deployed to Los Angeles have received training or are currently being trained in de-escalation, crowd control, and less than lethal means. I received a response to a request for information from the Marines yesterday that said that only a portion of the battalion has completed this training and the remainder will be fully trained shortly. Will any Marine be allowed near civilians in Los Angeles before completing the full course of this training?
No, ma'am.
Excellent. Good to hear. Precisely how many hours of formal instruction has each Marine already received on crowd control and less than lethal tactics?
They've received 4 days worth of training.
Yesterday you said more than 2 hours, but you'd get back with specifics. Now you can say precisely 4 days?
4 days.
Okay, good to know. Within the last hour, CNN has begun reporting that, quote, the 700 Marines mobilized to the LA area on Monday night are still undergoing training as of Wednesday morning, and it is not yet clear when they will be employed onto the streets to help with protests, end quote, according to the U.S. Northern Command spokesperson. And yet yesterday, the Secretary of Defense was in front of the House Appropriations Committee where he told that committee that as far as training, all of the units on the ground had been fully trained in their capabilities of what they're executing on the ground. Should this committee believe your statements today and the Northcom spokesperson, or the Secretary of Defense's testimony in front of the Appropriations Committee?
Well, ma'am, Marines are always training. Every time there's a down moment, we're rehearsing, we're training. So training to deploy has been completed, but they are going to continue to train. Again, every time there's a break in anything, there's a break in the action, so to speak, Marines are training. We train constantly.
Sure, but the training for non-lethal and de-escalation and force, what they're doing in LA is very different from what you normally train for. So I'm not sure the training is exactly the same. Well, at least I hope it's not.
It is different, but it can still be repeated and it can still be drilled.
Okay. And it was clear from conversations that I've had with the Marines and from your answers yesterday to the Senate that the Marines in LA have not been explicitly tasked with law enforcement, which is good because under the law that would be illegal. However, with the evolving dynamics in Los Angeles, I'm concerned that the Marines on the ground who are young could be put in compromising situations due to posse comitatus. So if someone on the ground with DHS or other law enforcement asks a Marine to do something that they cannot do according to the law, how are they meant to address that?
Well, ma'am, they have leaders with them. They have staff non-commissioned officers and officers who will ensure that they don't violate the Posse Comitatus Act.
Okay. And will you commit to making the standing rules for the use of force that they are operating under public?
Yes, ma'am. The SRUF, the standing rules for the use of force, are currently public.
Okay. We have been unable to get a public copy of them, so I appreciate your help in making sure we can further publicize these public rules.
Yes, ma'am.
So look, I recognize that the Marine Corps is just following an order, and that's your job, but I find it unacceptable that the Pentagon took control of the National Guard and sent active duty Marines to Los Angeles when the relevant offices in California expressed that their deployment was unnecessary, including the Los Angeles Police Department, who are not, leftists, who said that deploying Marines was unnecessary and could make it more difficult for them to do their job. The Pentagon and President Trump are escalating the situation drastically by unnecessarily deploying troops and causing more chaos. And frankly, our community, our National Guard, and our Marines deserve better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of New York, of California didn't do their job to protect their city, and that your men and women were called upon to do that. Mr. Secretary, would it surprise you to say if I told you that the Chinese hold a 250-to-1 advantage in shipbuilding right now, large ships over the United States?
No, sir, it would not.
And so how long would it take for us to increase our capacity by 25,000%?
I'm not sure you and I will be alive when we got to that.
I agree. Okay. And so do we have any idea of the plans for the PLA Navy? I mean, how many ships, how big is their Navy going to be?
Sir, it's hard to say. Our ships are far superior to their ships. So, that's a game we've been playing for a long time. I think the Chinese strategy is to overwhelm with numbers. We are a much better force. We are much better trained sailors and Marines. So I think it's what we pick and what we have. You could argue to some extent that the more they build, given the speed at which technology and what we've seen in some of these other conflicts, that could at some point become a disadvantage. However, we are too far behind, and I think there's a stat that I've used. The Chinese build more ships in a year than we have since World War II.
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, we won World War II with, what, a 6-to-1 advantage on shipbuilding, 6 aircraft carriers for every one that the Japanese built, and we won the Second World War with that. And so they have a 250 ship advantage. Look, if I asked you 3 weeks ago, hey, I want to destroy like 1/3 of the Soviet bomber force, and your answer probably would have been, well, I think we need some long-range bombers, we need some long-range weapons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because that's, and yet, what, about a week ago, 1/3 of their bomber fleet was actually destroyed by drones, and a different way to engage the Soviet, or not the Soviets, but the Russians. So I think the same holds true for the Navy. So if I probably ask you right now, hey, I want to sink Chinese ships, the Admiral, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think most you'd say, well, we need more submarines, et cetera, conventional weapons and all that. But I'd like for you to start thinking outside the box. Because for every ship that the Chinese built, I want 1,000 different ways to sink it. Not 1 or 2 or 5. I want 1,000 different ways to sink it. And then good luck trying to stop 1,000 different things that are going to sink you. And so, Mr. Secretary, do you have a group of people that just completely think out of the box? Or do you have a way to access a group of people that are not stuck in paradigms and that completely think that, you say, I want to sink a ship, and they were going to give you 1,000 different ways to sink a ship that doesn't have an aircraft carrier, doesn't have a destroyer, doesn't have a submarine. Do you have access to that? Do you have a group like that?
Congressman, we're putting one together. I would say stay tuned. I've gotten a few briefs already that have been enlightening, and I would tell you our capabilities are quite formidable. I think they should keep our adversaries at pace, but as I said, they are catching us at an accelerating rate. We do need to pivot. We do have that access. We are putting that together and putting together carefully very good teams, and that is why I'm saying the whole force posture that we're looking at, the way we are going to fight is going to change, and so I look forward to sharing that with you.
I agree, because I don't really want to fight their fight. I mean, on a production scale, they could outproduce us, so I want to fight them a different way, all right? And so, I think the Poles still had cavalry back in 1939, right? They somehow thought it was a really good idea to face the Germans with cavalry, and I thought they got, okay, well, it might have been great, in the 19th century, but cavalry in the 20th century just didn't work. And so maybe in the 21st century, our force structure, their force structure may not be the way that, the future of warfare is coming. And I can see that, coming pretty quickly, and we as a nation need to pivot to a new way. And I hope that you'd get more than 2% into automated systems that you have right now in the budget. And my time's up, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair Liner recognizes the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Secretary, I want to begin with you and thank you for visiting the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard right at the beginning of your tenure. You were there back in April, and I was very encouraged to hear from you, and I appreciate you too, Admiral, prioritizing what we need to do for our public shipyards. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard is America's oldest public shipyard, and the men and women who work there have really hard and important jobs, and I appreciate what you've said about the need to support our shipyard workers. We also need to hire more shipyard workers, as you've both testified. And at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, we've got to hire 550 workers a year. I was encouraged, Mr. Secretary, that when you visited back in April, you announced that 150 personnel have received initial job offers. I wanted to ask you, as far as we know, no one has actually been hired since then. And we want to support you in clearing the way of any red tape or bureaucratic process that is preventing shipyard workers from being hired. So could you give us a status update?
I'll have to take that one for the record and come back to you. Congresswoman, I don't have those numbers with me right now.
Well, would very much appreciate an update on the status, and we'll submit questions that go directly to any bureaucratic hurdles that you're facing at OMB or OPM. You know, I also just want to point out what you've said about supporting our workers is really important. They're facing a real attack because of the president's executive order that seeks to really strip away fundamental rights of our unionized shipyard workers and federal employees across the board. One of my real concerns about H.R. 1, the GOP budget bill, is the elimination of the federal employee retirement system, the FERS annuity supplement, which is really so critical to helping federal employees who retire before the age of 62. It's bad policy, and it's hurting our shipyard workers and really federal workers across the board. And I want to just point that out. Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for what you've committed to doing with respect to the audit. This is incredibly important. I will submit questions to you about what specific barriers you face in achieving a clean audit, which is so essential to public trust and to any functioning organization. And I also want to thank you for your commitment to the right to repair and for your candor in assessing the situation as it is, that this is just simply nonsense and an outrage that we can't fix our own equipment. And I look forward to hearing what steps you're concretely taking to ensure that we fix the way that we do contracts and we empower the Navy to repair its own and maintain its own equipment. General, I want to pick up on my colleague's line of questioning and ask you, and Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit to the record an article from the Associated Press yesterday entitled "Pentagon Draws Up Rules on Possible Use of Force by Marines Deployed to LA Protests."
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. General, can you please clarify what rules, the President's executive order do not specify what rules apply to any Marines who have been deployed to Los Angeles or who will be deployed domestically in the future? What rules apply and when were those rules written? Because according to this article, quote, the Pentagon was scrambling just this week on Monday to establish rules to guide U.S. Marines who could be faced with the rare and difficult prospect of using force against citizens on American soil.
Ma'am, we're using the standing rules for the use of force, or SRUF. These rules emphasize de-escalation, use of non-lethal force, and the inherent right of self-defense for Marines and others. So SRUF, standing rules for the use of force.
And General, you commit to providing this committee with a complete copy of the rules that are being distributed right now?
Yes, ma'am.
And when were those rules developed? Were they revised at all?
I don't believe they were revised, ma'am.
So it's always been clear from your perspective what rules apply, and it's the rules you just mentioned.
Yes, ma'am. These are rules that we would use in any number of situations. Marines have training in crowd control, and they have these rules for embassy reinforcement. They have these rules for non-lethal situations, and they're trained to them.
Thank you, General. And the 4 days of training, who is responsible for this training, and where is it being conducted?
Ma'am, I am responsible for it, and the local commanders are responsible for it. It's being conducted at home station.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from South Carolina, Ms. Mace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing before us today. South Carolina's Low Country has a long history as a maritime hub and commercial shipping channel, and it continues to play a critical role in sustaining our Navy's mission, supporting ship repair, logistics, and a skilled maritime workforce. Beaufort County is home to Parris Island and the Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. We're enormously proud that we make Marines. For more than a century, Parris Island has been making Marines. At MCAS Beaufort, aviators gain the skills and resilience necessary to operate in the most challenging, contested environments across the globe while maintaining a high state of readiness to deploy and support Marine Corps operations worldwide. Today, I look forward to discussing how we can build upon this strong foundation with sustained investment in infrastructure, expanded training capacities, and integration of cutting-edge technologies. The Low Country has the potential to play an even greater role in our national defense. So, General Smith, I have a few questions for you. I'll start with you this morning. The Marine Corps is undergoing one of the most significant transformations in its history as we modernize for the future of conflict. We must ensure the Corps' training continues to produce the most lethal force in the world. So, General Smith, are the key tenets of force design reshaping the Marine Corps view on the recruit training taking place at Parris Island?
Yes, ma'am. Our recruit training hasn't changed.
And what role will basic training play in building Marines capable of contested environment operations?
Ma'am, basic training is designed to produce a basically trained Marine who will then go on to his or her specialty. So, again, our basic training, even though we're doing force design, our basic training remains unchanged. It is the standard by which we train a Marine.
And are we using Parris Island currently to train for advanced small unit amphibious tactics?
Ma'am, we are not.
Okay, are there any plans to, is this a feasible location, I guess, for this kind of training? Would it be a feasible location?
Ma'am, I think it would be. It would be a matter of capacity, moving from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which is where most of our assets reside, and most of our infantry Marines reside.
Okay, and as the Marine Corps considers manned-unmanned teaming, are there any plans to conduct any of this kind of training at MCAS Beaufort?
Ma'am, there is a little bit of discussion about using unmanned systems at Beaufort. Some of our big wing drones are MQ-9s, et cetera. So we will continue to evaluate whether it is feasible to support that at MCAS Beaufort.
What would you need to be supported there?
We would frankly need infrastructure. We'd need base housing. We would need the ability for our hangars to house multiple types of aircraft, et cetera.
I was going to ask, do they have enough hangars there, hangar space?
No, ma'am, they do not.
Not yet.
They do not.
Okay. How is the Marine Corps leveraging virtual training to prepare aviators for real-world conditions?
Ma'am, I just was down at Pensacola. In fact, we are leveraging it such that an individual student can go into use goggles and use a virtual T-38 and train themselves, basically. They've got original training, but they can repeat and they can practice as many times as they want to accelerate their syllabus. And once you're trained and you pass the syllabus, then you move on. And we've seen that it is cutting through, or it is cutting down on the glut and the backlog of.
So you see an advantage to using
absolutely.
the technology and training Marines?
Yes, ma'am. We're using
more
that
effectively.
Across the board. We're using that in our ACV, our amphibious combat vehicle. We're using that at flight school, and that is naval aviation.
I've crashed a few planes on one of those simulators. It's not easy.
Ma'am, it's very realistic.
Yeah. But back to a question about infrastructure investments in MCAS Beaufort. What infrastructure investments is the Marine Corps prioritizing to ensure MCAS Beaufort can continue to fulfill its mission?
Ma'am, frankly, what we need is hangar space, and we need our maintenance facilities. That is the key. If it's going to house Marine Corps aircraft, we have to have hangar space to protect those aircraft from storms, and we have to have maintenance space.
Do you know roughly the amount of investment or money that's needed to continue the mission?
Ma'am, I don't. I'll have to get that and take it for the
I
record.
would love to. I've been down there, and I've been in some of the hangars, and I've seen it multiple times. So would love that information if your office can provide that to us. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back, and thank you very much, General.
Thank you, ma'am.
The gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Cisneros.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. Secretary Fallon, John Paul Jones, the father of the Navy, wrote, "It is by no means enough that the officer of the Navy should be a capable mariner. He must be of that course, but also a great deal more. He should also be as well a gentleman of liberal education, refined manners, punctuous courtesy, and the nicest sense of personal honor." By liberal education, he means a sense, right? Literature, sciences, mathematics. It's even inscribed on the walls at the Naval Academy. But yet, the Navy's removed 400 books from the Naval Academy. They've stopped, groups of students that would come together to study for each other that focused on engineering and other things. How are we living up to this motto here if we're removing books? Do we not want our officers to be well-read?
Congressman, thank you for the question. So currently there is a panel that OSD has convened that is assessing books across all military installations. Therefore, I defer on this topic to them. Currently at the Naval Academy, I think, and at two other Nova postgraduate in the War College, I think we're talking about low double-digit books numbers. So I think you're...
400 seems like a pretty significant number from the Naval Academy. I mean...
I believe that number is no longer accurate, and that was a media invented number.
So we're talking double, like no more than 99 books.
I'm talking like 15 to 20, is that right, Admiral?
15 to 20.
21 at the Naval Academy.
All right. Can we see that list, if I could?
The panel is working on it, so as soon as we get that study, I'll be happy to share that with you.
All right. I'd like to see that book. All right, or that list. Admiral Kilby, does the Navy need a next-generation fighter?
In my opinion, we do.
All right. The administration's proposing gutting the next-generation fighter, and that was something that just kind of came out pretty recently, as in the last couple days, from their proposed budget. And it's a program that I've repeatedly heard from uniform officials that they need. So how do you reconcile this? How are you moving forward to kind of ensure that we are going to have the research funds in order to ensure that we can move forward with a next-generation fighter?
So thank you for that, Congressman. Look, I think as it comes to next-gen fighters, as I said before, we're looking at the full composition of the air wing of the future. And so we have to focus on the capabilities and technologies for years to come that are going to win. And that includes manned and unmanned platforms that we have to look at. I do not have a lot of confidence. All of our programs are in trouble. We have a number of companies that are not performing. We've got to get those done. So I think looking at this system, 6th Gen is important, and I know it's important to the Admiral, and he should always give you his best military advice. I think we're looking at the whole panacea of what we've got, and then how we can, what makes the most sense to use in the future. And so I think we have to get more confidence in the base. This is a system that, you know, as I said in my opening statement about readiness means like ready, like today and then in the future. And how is that future changing, and how do we think about that? And so we're looking at it, evaluating it, and trying to make sure that we're not back here in 2 years saying, we told you it was going to cost X, it's actually going to be X plus 50, and by the way, it's going to be late. So that's really what we're trying to do.
Well, look, I think the Navy has a bigger challenge than anybody else with the high expensive cost of the items, right? Everything from ships to fighters to the missiles and everything that they need, the weapons. And trying to balance that all is definitely a challenge. But we need to ensure, right, that we continue to move forward, as you said, right? Readiness today, but also to develop for the future. And that is something that I am willing to work with you there. Whatever we can do to help support that mission, right? We want to ensure that we can do the fight today, but also prepare for the future. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, gentlemen. The Department of the Navy is currently spending tens of millions of taxpayer dollars per year to develop custom-built software on top of proprietary low-code platforms for its electronic procurement systems, or EPS. However, in 2024, NAVWAR technical review of EPS cited delays, platform immaturity, outdated architecture, and limited functionality after a decade of the program's development. Secretary Phelan, given the administration's focus on integrating commercial solutions to achieve greater efficiency, why is the department not, or is it competing this program for a more innovative, scalable, and cost-efficient off-the-shelf solution?
We're reviewing all of our IT systems and all of our systems, and we've canceled some already. So Navy HR, which had a bunch of redundancy that was not working, and we had a contractor who could not fulfill the obligation. So I don't have that specific one, Congressman. I'll come back to you on it, but all of them are being reviewed. All of those contracts are being reviewed to remove redundancies, and if they're not working, we're going to get rid of them. I can tell you, as someone who I get for me just to send a 3-sentence email from my office takes almost like a minute. That's how bad the systems are. That's just in the Pentagon. So we need to update our systems. We need to analyze all of these. That is going on, and we're working very hard on it. But I don't have an answer for you on that specific.
Yes, sir, I understand. And redundancy, I mean, it's almost, you can't even say the word government without having the word redundancy built in on top of it. Are you looking at both private and government? I understand, okay, as a former military man, I know that, hey, we want to do everything ourselves, but there comes a point in time where we might need to lean into the commercial space in order to help us do that.
We should get out of the IT development business. We're not good at it.
General Smith, you made an extremely valid point earlier when you were talking about drone technology and how your Marines are developing their own drones, because there's no more efficient and effective killer than the ones that are being shot at, and we are amazing at what we do. And Mr. Admiral Kilby, you got Naval Special Warfare inside of you doing the exact same thing. And the issue is we have outside entities trying to come into our organization to help, and we have an inside organization trying to get permissions to do what we do best. The chairman and the ranking member are doing the SPEED Act, and that's trying to clear the muddy water. I think the point that I'm trying to make is you've heard the leadership, they're leaning on you for those ideas. Because we're on this side more or less looking in to the operators, okay? Don't hesitate to ask and tell us what you need, okay? Because we're eyes wide open and the ears as well. With health and wellness inside our communities, you listed off your 3 priorities, both of you did, and I don't necessarily agree with the order, because I would put my sailors up top and I would put my Marines up top, be the first words out of my mouth. And I know we're focused in on that. And General Smith, I've got a fine young Marine that works in my office, and he speaks very highly of you. And that says a lot. And he says you're focusing in on your troops, which is amazing. As we move forward, the transition period from when an active service member jumps off that bullet train into the civilian space and becomes a veteran is unforgiving. There's really nothing on the outside to catch us. Mr. McGuire, can you lean to the right just a little bit, please? Thanks so much. There's really nothing on the outside to catch us when we leave. That bullet train continues down the track, and everybody that's someone that's looking forward, front sight focus, and everybody else is tucking and rolling. Here you go. And then the VA does their absolute best to receive us. I think there's a breakdown in communication from active duty and the hot handoff to the VA. And I'm probably pretty certain that you guys are concentrating on that, but we need to concentrate a lot harder, because my number one issue as a member of Congress is to get our veteran suicide rate from over 6,000 a year down to 0, okay? But I need your help. Fair enough?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Concur.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses here today. General Smith, it's good to see you. As a member of the Joint Chiefs, you serve as a military advisor to the Secretary of Defense and the President. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Were you involved in the decision to mobilize 700 Marines to the streets of Los Angeles?
Mr. Secretary or Congressman, I was not involved in the decision to mobilize, but I was involved in the decision of who to mobilize.
Thank you. Were these Marines that were deployed adequately trained to deal with these domestic events?
They have been trained before they deployed, yes, sir.
How long were they trained for?
They were trained for multiple hours.
Hours? Give me days?
Well, I would say over the course of a couple of days, they received multiple hours worth of training.
Is that adequate training?
That is, sir.
Do you think these Marines' time could be better spent back in 29 Palms, continuing to train and carry out their mission?
Well, sir, I'm compliant with all lawful guidance, so I won't get into, what they should or shouldn't be doing. But we were given lawful guidance to deploy that battalion, and that battalion has deployed.
Have there been discussions about mobilizing additional Marines to LA or other places throughout the country?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Thank you. If domestic mobilizations continue, do you think this will erode public trust in the reputation of the Marine Corps?
Sir, I think the Marines are going to conduct themselves with the same dignity and professionalism that they always conduct themselves with, and they will continue to bring credit to the Marine Corps regardless of the mission they're assigned.
Can you elaborate as to what they can do and cannot do as Marines on domestic soil?
So I can, sir. They are underneath, they're supporting NORTHCOM. Their mission, as directed by the SecDef, directed NORTHCOM to assume command in order to protect federal property and federal personnel. That is their mission, sir, protect federal property and federal personnel.
And in doing so, for example, can they fire warning shots?
No, sir, we do not fire warning shots.
Thank you. Secretary Phelan, if Congress gave the Marine Corps, let's say, a check for $134 million, what would you spend this on? And could that be used to increase the quality of life for our Marines or help deliver capabilities to the warfighter?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. We can use all the funds that you can give us.
So you could use the funds to do so many important things.
As I said, we have a mission, and our mission is to be prepared to fight and do as the President and Secretary of Defense order us to do, and that is what we're doing. And so, yeah, we need capital in order to support our programs. Yes.
General Smith, same question to you. What could you do with $134 million as in order of your priorities?
Well, I would spend it on training and on barracks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Virginia, Ms. Kiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to our panelists for being here. I have the privilege of representing a big Navy district down in Hampton Roads, Virginia, and wanted to thank you all for continuing to prioritize the quality of life, quality of service measures that we spent so much time on last Congress. That continues to be a priority of mine as well. So many of my colleagues have talked about shipbuilding and ship repair during this session, and technology integration, use of unmanned and drones. So thank you for keeping that also on the top of your list of things to do. I wanted to take a few minutes, though, and talk about the importance of the East Coast Navy. And we see when we turn on the news and we, for example, are watching our F-18s drop bombs on the Houthis in Yemen, or there's something that arises in the world, and we frequently send our aircraft carriers and our battle groups and our air wings from the East Coast. And I know we recently welcomed Tom the Truman and before that the Eisenhower battle groups, and a lot of activity between what's happening in the Baltic Sea with the Russians and their submarines to what's continuing to happen in the Middle East and the Red Sea and Israel. So we can't understate the importance of the East Coast. And I represent the East Coast Master Jet Base, which is woefully underappreciated, woefully not taken care of. So I just wanted to hear from you all, because you all are all the leadership of our naval services. Admiral Kilby, can you please tell me what you think is the importance of the East Coast Navy in projecting American strength and deterrence?
Rep. Kiggins, thanks for that question. Quick soundbite on Truman. You know, she defended herself or other ships or another country 160 times on her deployment. She conducted 670 strikes from the air or from the sea into Yemen, and she conducted the biggest strike in the history of the world from a single aircraft carrier into Somalia. 8 named operations, 3 different combatant commanders, so I double down on what your statement is and concur. And Master Jet Base Oceana is a big portion of that, in addition to all the infrastructure at Hampton Roads, which is really all services, but primarily Navy, between the Navy base and Oceana.
Our aircraft carriers, just to echo that, continue to be tip of the spear. We can get America's might there in a matter of days. There's nothing that can replace that. And do you think that the East Coast Master Jet Base then needs F-35s and needs our next generation of strike fighter?
I think it needs to keep up with the Navy just like the West Coast in all respects, and I think it needs to be maintained. So there's a
infrastructure thing that the Secretary and I are after, to include hangars and all runways and piers and all those things. And I, when I was the Deputy Commander of Fleet Forces, I went to Masterjet Base Oceana and concur wholeheartedly with what you're
So
saying.
can I get your commitment in the strategic laydown planning that will be happening very soon, that will be prioritized, our East Coast Master Jet Base? I know the Marines are being taken care of. They have, I believe, 4 F-35 squadrons. The Navy has 0 right now. We have 0 commitment from the Navy saying that they will get F-35s and will get next generation strike fighters, and it's becoming extremely frustrating.
I commit to you to look at that and continue to work for that end state, ma'am.
And then I also wanted to echo what my colleague had previously said, to open the news the other day and see that the Navy, we had $500 million that was being taken away from us from the Department of Defense to be committed to F-47s that the Air Force had, when Congress and Armed Services Committee had specifically allocated that money for next generation strike fighters. We need that money for a lot of reasons. China is already, they are already testing and flying J-50s and J-36 fighters, which is their 6th generation fighter. The Navy, to be competitive with that, has got to make that investment. I know the Air Force has got a lot of needs as well, but Secretary Phelan, can you please one more time address what you are doing to push back on that Department of Defense statement that they made that said they weren't going to take away the Congress appropriated money and give it to the Air Force?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. Look, as I said, we continue to look at the air wing of the future and the capabilities of 6th Gen and what that means. It's part of the whole force posture we're looking at between manned and unmanned and those different platforms and what makes the most sense. So I look forward to working with you as we develop those plans.
And we cannot do the missions that we just previously talked about, that the Truman has just accomplished in the Red Sea, without that next generation strike fighter money allocated. So please prioritize that. On top of that, and in closing, just wanted to put in my 2 cents about naval aviation training. We need T-45 replacements. That needs to be added to the top of the priority list. We cannot take between 3 and 4 years to train naval aviators and Marine Corps aviators. It's taking too long, and we need that Navy commitment. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Ellsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I want to build on some of the questions my colleagues started regarding preparing for the future of warfare. Representing Maryland, I recently visited Naval Air Station Pax River and saw some really impressive and critical work being done there, including the anechoic chamber, which is essential for training for warfare of the future. And it's in such high demand that even when it runs 24 hours a day, there's still a 5 to 6 year backlog on that training. So Admiral, can you speak to the Navy's priority list in terms of getting a second such chamber?
I cannot, but I will take that question for the record and come back to you, ma'am.
Okay, do you agree it's essential for warfighting?
I do, but I just don't have the specifics. I'll get them to you.
Understood, thank you. I'd like to move on to energy, and Mr. Secretary, I was really glad to hear that readiness is your priority. Last week, this committee was informed that energy resilience is military readiness, and representing the United States Naval Academy, I would suggest that your installations between the Marine Corps and the Navy are perhaps most ill-positioned to bear the impacts of sea level rise and hurricanes and extreme weather. So can you speak to, you've made some great progress, particularly in microgrid programs at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Anybody, for anybody here, how are Navy and Marine Corps applying the lessons from that base on microgrids, but also thinking about SMRs, which is a particular priority for this committee to address our energy vulnerabilities, for anybody?
Well, ma'am, I'll take it off. The microgrids are operationally viable to us. We use them here in the continental United States, for example, as you know, at Miramar, but they're operationally deployable. Our goal is to be able to produce our own energy when forward deployed, to need less, to be able to operate in a contested environment while producing our own energy, using solar panels, et cetera, to be able to power radios, because sometimes just the radio, having a battery, is enough to get the job done. So we're committed to continuing to do that for tactical reasons, not necessarily environmental reasons, but for tactical reasons.
I totally agree, and all of the above approach to energy generation, resilience, storage is incredibly important for infrastructure and for readiness. Mr. Secretary, I was also really grateful to hear you admit that we have historically, everybody, underinvested in infrastructure. And I would add personnel and training to the definition of infrastructure. According to the GAO, 64% of executive officers found it difficult to conduct sailor-led maintenance due to manning shortfalls, and 75% find it difficult for sailors to complete repairs. The manning shortfalls are credited to a lack of requisite training and experience to fill these positions, and I also understand that Navy ships lack onboard parts and equipment to make necessary repairs while they're deployed. And I'd add on to that we're currently in an uncontested environment, so all of those issues just expound when we move to a contested. What specific steps are we taking to mitigate this direct link between manpower deficits and material readiness problems in the fleet, and how are we addressing the lack of pre-positioned parts on board ships?
Can I take that, Representative Elthworth? I'd agree with you. I do think there's a component that we're addressing through recruiting and training and getting sailors to ships at the apprentice level, which includes those logisticians that will handle those parts. There's also a commitment from me to fund our repair parts to where they need to be. And thirdly, I think there's an opportunity to really pressurize our jumping into this additive manufacturing space a little bit more aggressively than we have, and I'm working on that with the Chief of the Supply Corps, and have just asked each community leader to give me their top 10 degraders to see if we can't make that, you know, equal with the first choice instead of the last choice. So we have work to do here.
I love that approach. I look forward to seeing that in the full budget whenever we do get it. And I think this is a good opportunity to double down on the chairman's comments about this being the latest we've ever received. We still don't have a budget, so it's difficult for us to do our constitutionally mandated job of oversight in this environment. And Admiral, I couldn't agree with you more. This is a moment in time where we have a bipartisan, once-in-a-generation commitment to shipbuilding, yet I'm not seeing that reflected in the president's skinny budget. And this is the last time you'll be in front of this committee this year. So can anybody speak to the fact that we are roughly 46% down in funding for shipbuilding in the skinny budget versus FY25? That seems like a real mismatch in our stated priorities.
I think, look, as I said earlier, we continue to work with OSD and OMB on the budget and through the numbers, and I think that we are pushing very hard, and I believe it will show a commitment to shipbuilding and a signal to the industry that we are taking it seriously.
I look forward to that full budget. Thank you.
As I've mentioned earlier, I know it's not your fault, and I've been trying to send a signal to OMB to get us a budget, and I'm very frustrated by the situation we're in, but I know where the problem's stemming from. Gentleman from Guam is recognized. Mr. Moylan.
Chairman, thank you for convening this hearing today with our distinguished witnesses. Secretary Phelan, thank you for making the long trip to Guam. Your visit to the military housing was, I'm very pleased that you did that, and you were able to condemn some of the barracks there because of health and safety reasons, and you ordered Camp Blas to be open for our sailors and Marines on Andersen Air Force Base, Guam. Thank you very much. And can you provide, Secretary Phelan, this committee some highlights of what you saw during that inspection?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I was very upset because when I was driving by, I saw a very pristine golf course, and then I saw a set of buildings that I thought should have been condemned. And when I found out that there were sailors and Marines in it, I was apoplectic. I then went in and visited 3 different rooms, one that had black mold all over the wall, another one where there's no air conditioning whatsoever. In fact, in all 3 rooms, it was deplorable, just to be perfectly honest. And I was frustrated because we did have Camp Blas done. I was told that it was going to take 4 or 5 months for that to get approved. I had walked the new barracks and had been in them. The air conditionings were working. Everything was working. and I basically said, they need to get into that building, and they need to get into it. You got 5 or 7 days, and if that doesn't happen, whoever's holding up that decision should go move into the barracks where those guys are staying until they're prepared to make that decision. Now, what I did see in Guam is some very also impressive things that we're doing in general there. So it is a critical station for us for a couple of different things that we do. You know, I saw really nice brand new facilities that have been built, you know, the training that is going on there and the sorties that are going on are pretty, you know, it's a busy place, I guess is what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And because of your efforts and your great concern for our troops there, Vice Admiral Gray did direct a comprehensive study of all Navy and Marine Corps facilities on Guam. Can you provide us with any updates on any of the inspection for that?
I'm still awaiting the final report, but did you have those numbers?
Yeah, the numbers are relatively small. 5% of the barracks that were expected fell in that condition, and we're taking action to move sailors out of that. Overall, the Navy's made progress in barracks. We went from 24% poor to 21%. That doesn't mean where we need to be. We need to continue after it until we have 0% of our barracks in poor condition. But we are increasing our focus on this area and taking action as the Secretary has directed.
Thank you. And anything we can do in Congress, that's what we're here for. Please let us know. In addition to that, Secretary, we talked about unaccompanied housing. How is the scrutiny for family housing on Guam? Are we doing the same level of inspection?
I don't know the answer to that question, Congressman. I will double check it and see. I did visit some of the different unaccompanied housing there, and I think that all of the old facilities there are probably not in great shape, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so I think we need to upgrade it in general.
Thank you. And I did have the opportunity to speak with General Alvin on the Air Force or the problems there as well. And so we asked him a question about looking at this overall build and maintain for privatization for unaccompanied and family housing as well. Do you foresee that as a possible solution for this?
It might be, Congressman, to be honest. I've looked at privatized housing. In some areas, it seems to work exceptionally well, and in some areas, very poorly. And I'm trying to understand, is that just the operator? Is it the contract? What is it that's causing that? And I think the way we incent private companies to manage these facilities is still a little confusing to me. I'm not real sure necessarily what they're doing. So I am going to be going, I think our two best ones are in San Diego and Virginia.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to go visit those and see what it is those companies are doing and why that's working there, and trying to understand why it's not working the other.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You go back.
Gentleman yields back to you, and I recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I welcome our witnesses, I just want to commend you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member on the SPEED Act on the record. This is a hugely important bill, and really appreciate all the work and the bipartisan effort on that. And I'm sure, hopefully, that results in addressing a lot of things that we've been consistently, and you all have been consistently talking about fixing our acquisition system. I was gonna use my minute to talk Army, Navy, and talk some trash about my team, hopefully besting your all's team next year, but I will not do that. And the main reason I'm not going to do it is I was really concerned about something that happened yesterday. Didn't directly affect your service, but I think it's important to speak about, which is what I believe, at least in my 43 years, an increasing level of politicization of the force that I served in, that you know, both you, General and Admiral, have bravely and heroically served in for multiple decades. So I just wanted to ask you a few questions about that. I think you've both attended multiple states of the Union at this point, is that right?
I've only attended one.
Thank you, Admiral.
Yes, sir, I've attended a couple.
And I didn't watch every minute of it, but my sense is that each of the service chiefs rightly sit there maintaining the apolitical nature of our military, a bedrock principle that I certainly learned as a young officer. Is it true that, that's how you all approach that as the leaders of our military, that you're there out of, in your role, but that you don't applaud any particular political statement?
That is what I tried to do.
General?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
What is the current guidance you're giving to each of your services and training, given in both parties an increased politicization of our military forces, especially for junior Marines and sailors that are trying to figure out how to get this right? Admiral.
Well, let me start. We are trying in the Navy to instill, in a world where social media is so prevalent, your responsibility as a uniformed member of our armed services to be apolitical. When you assume that responsibility through that oath, with that comes great responsibility to protect exactly what you are aligning to. Now, we have had to put out some social media guidance so people understand that, and they understand that when they show up in uniform, they're representing their service, not just their individual being.
Thank you, Admiral. And I know, social media is one thing. Visits by elected officials who, by federal rules, are also technically candidates, having declared their candidacy for re-election, or at least filed campaigns for re-election. I think those sort of events present an even more complicated thing, and we saw this play out yesterday at Fort Bragg. For example, what guidance do you give for your Marines and sailors that are attending what's supposed to be an official event, but if it becomes an increasingly political event, General, what training and guidance are you putting out about that? Because I'm concerned we're putting our folks in a tough position right now.
Well, what I would say, Congressman, is an elected official who's coming to give a speech about the military, that's fine. Military can attend. They can't participate in the dialogue.
Yeah, I'm saying when that official visit becomes overtly political, whether that's wearing a campaign hat, for example, or using, in my view anyway, overt political rhetoric. And what guidance or training are you giving to your Marines about that?
Well, we don't give Marines any training on that. They don't participate, they participate in the political process at the ballot box, but they don't participate in the political dialogue.
I do think it's important, given what happened yesterday, for both of you to look at that. I think some of those Army soldiers were put in a really tough position. I don't blame that on them. I don't blame it on the leaders on the ground there, but I think we're crossing lines every day that I'm concerned about, and would ask each of you to think about what do we need additional guidance or training there. I don't have the answers yet, but I don't want to put our brave young men and women in a tough spot where they might think they're going to an official event, but all of a sudden it feels an awful lot like a campaign rally. And I say that having watched the Commander-in-Chief wear a MAGA hat at West Point graduation, which to me was unacceptable politicization of a day that should be about celebrating those 1,002 brave young men and women who graduated that day. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, making America great again, one hearing at a time. Welcome, gentlemen, to testify before us. As Secretary, a point of personal privilege as a former enlisted soldier, it was uplifting to hear how you responded regarding the housing requirements and the challenges we face in Guam. And I asked to put on your radar that my office certainly stands in support of any endeavor that you pursue to make sure our soldiers, sailors, Marines have a decent place to lay their head as much as possible. Sometimes that's no place to lay your head. Speaking as a soldier, you're glad to find a decent tree somewhere, but when you house on base, it should be a place of restoration of the body and the soul. So thank you for your endeavor there. I ask you to consider the YRBM as as a very effective method that we can use for forward deployment and completely appropriate berthing for our war fighters. Regarding NAVC, Mr. Secretary, this is my 9th year serving we the people in this bizarre realm of Washington, D.C. And I've learned a lot about shipbuilding. You know, I was a police officer prior to Congress, so I didn't know anything about shipbuilding, really. But it's been a very steep learning curve, and I've been hard at it. And what I have learned is that there's some issues with NAVC. Let me just leave it at that. And I encourage you to address it aggressively. Many of the shipbuilders that I serve seem to have constant challenges with communications and design change and delays and contractual disputes. It's unnecessary difficulties, and I'm uplifted to hear that you plan to address that. Regarding platform support vessels, Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you there. The Navy faces significant logistics challenges in the Indo-Pacific region, and the Fleet Readiness Office has identified the need for and approved the use of at least a dozen or so at-sea resupply ships to enable refueling, rearming, and resupply of naval assets, both afloat and on shore, in contested environments and theaters of engagement via ship-to-ship operations and ship-to-port operations. So, I understand that the Navy's Fleet Readiness Office has identified commercially available platform supply vessels, or PSVs, as a potential solution here. Will you speak to that versus the time and expense of building vessels as brand new? Admiral, Mr. Secretary General.
Yeah, I'll start. We are focused on 1 January 2027. I think there's an opportunity to use some vessels that exist today, not just for resupply and supply, but also for other things, counter C5ISRT and others, as we transition to this hybrid fleet. So I think it's an and answer. I don't think it's an or answer, and I look forward to working with you, sir.
Yes, sir. Excellent. My dad was a Navy guy, so I learned to speak the language. By the way, Admiral, I can follow you. General?
Sure, I think anytime we can use a commercially available vessel that's already extant, we should. It may not suit all of our needs, but if it meets 80% of our needs, then we got to call that good enough and move on. So I'm a big fan of using things that are extant now because it reduces the time burden, and time is the one thing in combat that you can't buy back.
Well, roger that. Mr. Secretary?
As I said, all options are on the table, and that's one we have to definitely consider. I mean, it's, as I said, there's the short term and long term, and we've got that is a big problem, and as the Navy likes to call the Indo-Pacific, we've got the tyranny of distance, so we need ships, and if that's the right answer, that's what we're going to do.
So we've covered, thank you, Mr. Secretary, we've covered like 2 essential topics here as it relates to readiness and deployment and shipbuilding. That's the YRBM as a solution for berthing and platform support vessels reconfiguration to serve our purposes. As we look at the budget, I look forward to discussing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you to our chairman and our ranking member. Good afternoon now to our witnesses, Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, and General Smith. Thank you for your many years and your dedication to our great nation. I proudly represent the heart of Illinois, home of the 182nd Airlift Wing in Peoria. They are the experts on board C-130s, which can do everything from airdropping our troops into hostile areas, landing on nearly non-existent runways, to weather reconnaissance. But I must share a story. My grandpa Sorensen proudly served as a photographer in the United States Navy during World War II to support air missions. There are 9 framed photographs framed on the wall above my desk on Capitol Hill. You know, I know he would have been proud of me, having learned the reasons from him why we support those who serve us today. Today, the Navy Reserve flies the aging C-130T Hercules model as the Navy's only tactical medium intra-theater airlift capability. Secretary Phelan, can you speak to the importance of the Navy Reserve C-130s and why we must capitalize to the newer KC-130J models?
I'm going to defer to my colleague here, Admiral Kilby, to give you.
Great.
So I do see a key component to transition, sir. I think we're roughly half legacy aircraft and half new aircraft. The new aircraft, of course, has a refueling capability, which is super important in the Pacific. So we are constrained in what we can put in our budget based on what we think the composite program is, but we are, and Vice Admiral Nancy LaCour is a strong advocate as her force flies that aircraft and how we put that together in our program.
Great, I appreciate that, Admiral. I also wanted to take a moment to talk about a veteran who served on a submarine as a diving officer during the Korean War. From 1951 to 1955, this courageous American served our country in the Navy, just like my grandpa did. But unlike my grandpa, this veteran was forced to resign from the Navy, receiving an other than honorable, rather than be court-martialed because of his homosexuality. Harvey Milk, like every veteran who served our nation, deserves our thanks. To Secretary Phelan, can you specifically explain to me and this committee why this administration no longer believes in honoring Mr. Harvey Milk's service to his nation?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Look, Secretary Hegseth is committed to ensuring that the names attached to all DoD installations and assets are reflective of the Commander-in-Chief's priorities, our nation's histories, and the warrior ethos.
Does he not prioritize all veterans, sir?
Potential renaming decisions will be announced once an internal review is completed. So nothing's been decided. He's asked for that review, and then we will.
Would you be able to express to him that it is important that we honor all veterans of their service?
I believe he does honor all veterans.
Thank you. As the only elected LGBTQ person on this committee, and the first ever from my home state, I speak for my neighbors and all Americans when I say that Navy veteran Harvey Milk was a warrior in Korea. Before becoming an elected leader, his service and his life ended with an assassin's bullet. I walk in the footsteps of leaders before me. He stood up for the same people who are being targeted, persecuted, and vilified by this administration today. My grandpa taught me to stand up for every veteran and thank them every time I see them, thank them for their service. But picking and choosing who deserves that thanks, it's not just wrong, it is un-American. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate your service to our nation, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Good to see you all here well and healthy. First of all, this is as near and dear to me as anything we've ever discussed in these hearings. My first deployment in 1994 on the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit was on the USS Tripoli, affectionately named USS Crippley. Been hit by a mine that cost probably about $1,000, which caused about $3.5 million of damage. Gave it a permanent list. It went dead in the water 3 times on float in temperatures that were well over 100 degrees with probably humidity about 90% because we could see about 2 miles just because of how dense the humidity was. That was our living conditions, where we had our gym, which was about the size of about 20 by 20 feet, right between where we stored the garbage, the morgue, and started the FAVs, right out the tail section where they also did the smoking on the FV, so you can imagine the conditions. We've improved since then. But what's interesting about that, as we do our new ship mods, much to your point, Mr. Secretary, we improved these ships, but we haven't really improved our projection of power. Matter of fact, we're very short on that because we don't have the ships. This was a ship that was created in 1966. And by the way, all three of the ships that I was on in the amphibious fleets that I was deployed on Marine Expedition have all been scuttled or scrapped now, so that makes me feel very old. But when we look forward and we see the shortcoming, when I came in, we were projecting a 600-ship Navy with the Reagan era. Now we're just trying to literally have enough to deploy to where we're supposed to go. My question is, why not, Mr. Secretary, take a ship, an old LHA, and remod it and actually have a ship ready to go until we have a replacement with a smaller investment of time and money until we're ready for the next step and we have a ship actually ready. I know it costs money, but does it cost as money and time as it does with these new ship mods that are getting way over budget? As you said, 57% over on the best case scenario, with a delay of at least 6 months with the best case scenario. Why not hold on some of those ships so we have projection of power? Because no matter how much we have of drones and all the new technologies and all the things we're doing to recreate our services, we don't have projection of power. You cannot replace that with a number. You cannot replace that with a drone. Why not do something in the short term to put that patch on there when we have a real significant challenge over in the Chinese seas and other areas where we need to project power right now?
So I'll let the Admiral give you specifics because we are doing this in some cases, particularly like on the Ohio-class subs and things like that. I think it's really a question of, one, what does it take to get those ships back online? Two, the costs of doing that. Three, the timing. So our issue is we have a shortage of workers. It's just, so if I take someone off a Columbia-class sub and to remod a ship to get it out there, I'm just going to extend that. And so that's, I think, difficult. I don't think it's as simple, and I'll let the Admiral comment on it, as just taking it out of the yard and putting it back in. And I think a lot of these ships, unfortunately, sit in the yard too long. Our maintenance schedules are too long. There are a number of these things compounding themselves, but let me let the Admiral maybe address it.
I'll try to be brief. I think we should look at that. It's something that we should look at. Our history here hasn't been good. We had a program called the Cruiser Mod Program, and the USS Tortuga came up yesterday in our hearing, and that's an LSD, which we're trying to bring back after the same program and having challenges doing that. So one, the ship has got to be capable. Two, I've got to produce a ship that I'm confident can sail underneath the Secretary's leadership and do what our country needs it to do. So it would have to meet those conditions.
Not to get political, but I tell you, we have about 16 million Americans out there that could be ship workers if they get off their butts and actually go back to work. That's one of the problems we have. We're trying to motivate them to do exactly that. Mr. Commandant, the Marine Corps has led the way and the only service to actually pass their audits in the last several years. What's your secret, and how could other services do better to copy the Marine Corps model to actually lead the way and be successful in the future of the way we manage our services?
Well, sir, thanks for that question. We've passed the last 2 audits, and we'll continue to pass them. Frankly, it's a culture. It starts at boot camp. It starts at your first unit. You're issued a shelter half, 5 tent pins, 3 tent poles, and a guide wire. And when you leave the unit, you turn in a shelter half, 5 tent pins, 3 tent poles, and a guide wire, or you get your butt down to Saigon Sam's and you buy that because you are responsible for it. And we have individual accountability. You're accountable for your cleaning gear for your M16. You're accountable for your shelter half. And it starts and ends there. It's just 100% accountability.
I'm out of time, but I think accountability is what government can learn from. God bless you. Semper Fi, gentlemen.
Gentleman yields back, Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Whitesides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank all 3 of you for being here today at a time when our main pacing threat is investing heavily in their own Navy, and the war in Ukraine is providing a forecast of what the future of state v. state warfare looks like. The 3 of you have especially pressing tasks, and I'm glad that this committee has the opportunity to discuss these issues with you today. I'd like to start by discussing recent reports that there is an effort within other elements of the Department of Defense to cancel the FA-XX program in favor of increased investment in the newly announced F-47. To me, that's the latest in a series of efforts to put all of our resources towards one solution. And I'll say to you what I said to your colleagues in the Air Force last week. It's important to pose multiple challenges for our adversaries. It's important to build multiple layers into our defenses. And so I remain concerned that pulling resources from the development of a next-generation Navy fighter in favor of a single Air Force fighter is both short-sighted and dangerous. With that in mind, Admiral Kirby, does the Navy still have a need for a next-generation fighter?
In my opinion, we do. In addition to unmanned aircraft in the future, it's a thing we call air wing of the future. So MQ-25 is an unmanned tanker. I believe we need a manned 6th-gen fighter. We're not ready to make that pivot, but there is a place for unmanned aircraft for us in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Do you believe that industry can support the development of that next-generation Navy fighter?
It's probably not I don't have an opinion on that because I haven't studied that, but my opinion is the Navy needs that fighter.
Great. Secretary Phelan, in your testimony, and Admiral Kirby, in your testimony, you refer to the importance of bolstering the maritime industrial base, and I couldn't agree with you more. Our shipbuilding industry faces challenges that our rivals do not, and we have to make serious progress or risk falling irretrievably behind. There are myriad challenges that need to be overcome, but I want to focus now on workforce. Every time I speak with anyone in the defense industry, they bring me their concern about the future of the workforce. As a generation of skilled tradesmen and women retire, they're worried that they won't have the means to replace them. I have the privilege to represent two outstanding community colleges, Antelope Valley Community College and the College of the Canyons. I also represent the innovative defense companies and defense development facilities like Plan 42 and Skunk Works. They all agree on one thing. If these schools could graduate double the number of STEM or skilled trades graduates, our defense industrial base would employ them faster and would use them. So with that in mind, Secretary Phelan, can you describe the steps that the Department of Navy is taking not only to bolster its recruitment and retention efforts for service members, but particularly to support the educational institutions who are training the skilled tradesmen and women our defense industrial base relies on?
So we continue to look at a number of different programs in order to get the workforce that we need. And I think there are programs going on around all the public shipyards that we have currently. And we continue, obviously, to support the educational institutions of the Navy. I think this is something that we are really trying to figure out what is the best mechanism to transfer that skill set. Because one of the things I'm learning when I visit with workers is the training that they're getting in some of these places is not as good as when they get to the yard. And we have to make sure we translate that better. And I think that is one of the key things we're still trying to figure out. And I look forward as we get that sorted together.
If I could, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I do want to cite an effort that happened in Representative Kagan's state. It's in Danville, Virginia, where they set up an additive manufacturing center of excellence. It's got many components. I'll just talk about the one component where they're working on 5 different disciplines. So it's additive manufacturing, welding, non-destructive testing, QA, and a thing called CNC, which is subtractive manufacturing. People go to those schools for 16 weeks, 8 hours a day, and they conduct 3 sections. At full bore, that system will produce 900 people a year to go in the defense industrial base with a 90% placement. That is a great model for us.
That's fantastic. And we have similar programs in the Antelope Valley around composite manufacturing. I think that is one of the pathways to the future. Thanks for your time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Good to see everyone again. And again, we wouldn't have a country without our men and women in uniform. Thank you. Your job is super important. And that was a great segue because Danville, Virginia, ATDM is in my district. So Admiral Kilby, in late April, you actually visited the Accelerated Training and Defense Manufacturing ATDM Summit at the Institute for Advanced Learning Research, IALR, in my district, Danville, Virginia. And during a Defense Appropriations Subcommittee hearing, you highlighted the value of the additive work being done at ATDM. And as you said, they do additive and subtractive. You have a quote. I have a quote here from you. It says, "This part was produced in Danville, Virginia. It is a part required to fix a helo hangar door. When we went to go look at how to make that part, or if it was available in the stock system. It was not. It would have taken 40 weeks to make that part, this part through the traditional means. But Danville made that part in 19 days. And you went on to mention that it could happen in 5 days today, because now they have the IP and would be on hand, and they could knock it out a lot quicker. And I believe this ship had to deploy on time, and if you had to wait 40 weeks, it would have been late. But working over Christmas and New Year's, it deployed on time. So given the administration's emphasis on shipbuilding, I wanted to ask Secretary Phelan, where do you both envision additive and advanced manufacturing in the maritime industrial base, and does the Navy have plans to accelerate the adoption of additive manufacturing for Navy shipbuilding?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're spending a lot of time looking at it and trying to figure out where we can use it, both for parts, occasionally more even modular building, which also will allow you to print parts easier. I also think it's potentially a solution for munitions as well. So I think this is a big focus for us.
Secretary Phelan, when you and I'm sorry.
I just concur. I think the system is not poised to jump into this, and that's what I'm trying to stimulate, that engagement.
Yeah, Secretary Phelan, when you and I toured the Columbia and the new Enterprise under construction, you said that the welders have the training of a neurosurgeon. And I believe some of those best welders that we need, in addition to the addition and subtraction 3D printing, are being trained right there in Danville. And I love it that you went to Guam, and I love it that you guys are taking care of your troops. But if your busy schedule permits, I'd love to attend a tour of ATDM in Danville and see what they're doing. Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, a recent Business Insider article included a quote from a Navy commander in the Red Sea that really struck home with me. Here's the quote: "In a lot of ways, the Red Sea, it's a knife fight in a phone booth." The article highlights the difficulty of conducting air and missile defense in tight geographic environments and issues related to using expensive and exquisite weapon systems against targets costing a fraction of the price and time to produce. Here we're talking about the Top Gun phrase, the need for speed. What lessons has the Navy drawn from operations in the Red Sea these almost past 2 years, and how do they frame your thoughts on a potential conflict in Indo-PACOM? And I guess I'll start with Admiral Kilby on that one.
Well, I'd say, sir, we want to, when asked in this in the past, do you regret this? I don't regret defending our ships and the 350 crew members that are on them. I do regret using SM2s and SM6s to do that when another munition might be more helpful. So we are, now the Ford Strike Group is the next Ford Strike Group to deploy from the East Coast. We have put a number of systems on those DDGs, Coyote, Hellfire, Longbow, and others, which should allow us to not use those preeminent munitions that we'd like to lose for a more challenging threat, and we're going to experiment with that. And to me, that is the path for us, is to not get caught up into, I've got to totally integrate this in the system and it's got to be tested, but put the system on that we know works for the Army in the case of the Coyote. Let us experiment with it at sea and then figure out how to develop that quicker.
General Smith, as part of the Marine Corps force design, the Marine Corps has adapted itself to be more agile and prepared for potential fight in Indo-PACOM. Part of this mission has been to acquisition systems like Nemesis to ensure that Marines can support sea denial and anti-surface warfare. Can you discuss how systems like Nemesis and others are factoring into the acquisitions decisions related to Indo-PACOM and potential to deter the CCP?
Congressman, I can. The Nemesis, the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, is...
Gentleman's time's expired. You have to give that answer for the record.
Aye, sir.
Gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Bell, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To our witnesses, thank you for being here today. And also, I always like to include the folks with you that I see behind you. Thank you for your service as well. My district is home to the production of some of the most well-known and advanced naval aircraft. This includes the FA-18, the EA-18G Growler, and the new MQ-25, the Navy's first operational carrier-based unmanned aircraft. As I've said time and time again, the St. Louis region plays a crucial role in the backbone of our defense establishment. And while St. Louisans are proud to contribute significantly to our national defense, I must also acknowledge that many of my constituents are still struggling to recover from the most devastating national disaster to hit our region since the late 1950s. This will not deter our pride in providing and supporting our national defense. We will rebuild. We will support our national security, and most importantly, we will continue to be a center for innovation, defense, and technology. The MQ-25, built in my district, is an accelerated acquisition program producing the U.S. Navy's first unmanned platform dedicated to its carrier air wings. The MQ-25 is slated for initial operational capability in 2026, and among many critical programs it will be used for, it will participate in refueling missions extending the strike radius of FA-18 Super Hornets and F-35Cs to beyond 1,000 nautical miles. It will also provide enhanced reconnaissance. Secretary Phelan and Admiral Kilby, would you agree that the MQ-25 is a critical capability for the future of the carrier, air wing, and overall naval operations?
I agree.
Short and sweet, I'm good with that.
Agree.
Given the current plan to procure 3 MQ-25s, wouldn't adding a 4th aircraft in FY26 further enhance naval readiness and operational flexibility, particularly in preparation for potential contingencies in the Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, it will. We want to get that aircraft out there as soon as possible. We want to integrate it with the air wing. That is, not only does it do all the missions you describe, but it also has a secondary benefit in that it trains our apparatus to do unmanned and manned flight ops at the same time. So there's a thing there that we have to really get through, and I believe that'll be almost a dam breaker. Once we figure that out, we'll be able to introduce capability much faster, whether it's sensing, reconnaissance, or potentially even lethality from a munitions perspective. But MQ-25 is the key for us.
Secretary, anything? Did you associate yourself with those remarks, or agree, disagree? Okay, thank you. There have been reports that the Pentagon may be considering delaying or even reallocating funds away from the development of the Navy's 6th-generation fighter program. While I understand the sentiment of many in seeing the FA-18 production, or seeing the end of the FA-18 production, my priority is ensuring that our Navy is equipped with the most advanced aircraft possible to maintain strategic positioning across the globe, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. Admiral Kilby, can you speak to the potential ramifications of further delaying the development of procurement of the Navy's 6th-generation fighter?
Yes, in my opinion, I believe the 6th-generation fighter is necessary for the Navy, just as it is for the Air Force. So to me, the thing that drives that necessity is the threat. And that aircraft is specifically designed to counter that threat for both services. So I believe it is important for us to produce a 6th-generation fighter and do all the things you discussed earlier, which is to create an air wing that is manned and unmanned and gives us the flexibility from the most survivable airfield, the ability to do what we needed to do. So to me, it's important to continue onwards here because I think China is not slowing down, and we shouldn't slow down either.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mismer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Secretary Phelan, my district is home to Naval Support Activity Crane, the largest Navy base in the continental U.S. and the 3rd largest in the world, and home to NWSC Crane. Crane is at the epicenter of our defense industry and has one of the fastest growing hubs for the defense industrial base. But before I get to my questions, I'd like to extend an invitation to you and Admiral Kilby to come to Indiana's 8th District and see Crane and the great work my constituents are doing.
Love to do that and look forward to it.
Outstanding.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, absolutely. Secretary Phelan, both the executive order on restoring maritime dominance and the Ships Act aim to revitalize shipbuilding industry, not in just coastal shipyards, but deep into America's interior places like the Midwest along the Ohio River and the Great Lakes that have an abundant industrial potential. Can you describe how you plan to implement the President's EO and comment on how the Navy will use our nation's interior states who have a huge industrial manufacturing capability, such as Indiana, to bolster our shipbuilding industry?
Thanks for the question, Congressman. Look, we're still going through the EO and ways that we can apply that. That EO is more focused on commercial right now, and so we're trying to figure out the military angle from that. And as I said earlier today, incorporating military design in our commercial shipbuilding, I think, is something we really need to look at and try to implement. And I am hoping that there are elements of that act that I think are very applicable. And so, in particular, if we open new shipyards, we can use aspects of that act to help probably incentivize military shipbuilding.
Excellent. I'm familiar with the Maritime Industrial Base Office and the good work they're doing. I'd encourage that office to visit the cities and towns in Middle America as much as possible. Is there anything else that the Navy is doing that might not be well known toward expanding our shipbuilding into the interior parts of the U.S.?
I had a conversation with Rep. Capter and recommended to her, again, the things I think we could do. I described with this one site in Danville. I think we need many Danvilles, and Illinois would be a great place to instantiate that. I just think we need to catch up in our industrial base. We're at 11%. We need to be about 33% of our workers need to work in that kind of manufacturing area, and I think that's the way to do it.
I'd also say, look, I think the Midwest in particular has got very good manufacturing in general, so whether it's components or other things, the supply chain, we have far too many parts that are sole source supplied and are very small. We need to really rationalize the supply chain and think through that and how that works. And I would think there are places in the Midwest, given its history and heritage, that could be beneficial to that.
Okay. Thank you. Secretary Phelan, one of the areas that NSWC Crane is researching, and I'm particularly focused on, is enhancing our strategic and theater deterrence through conventional prompt strike and nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missiles. Within the CPS program, a leading technical risk is whether a novel CPS launch design could impart risk on the platform during an underwater launch. For that reason, the CPS program has invested in an underwater test capability. And the underwater test launch schedule is dangerously late. Are you focused on maintaining the underwater test launch capability schedule to ensure the testing schedule has enough time to reduce the risk of submarine deployment of our missile programs?
Sir, I need to get back to you on that. I will engage Vice Admiral Johnny Wolf, who runs the strategic program, and come back to you with an answer about whether we're concerned or not. But in short, I support that facility, and I just need to understand the specifics more to get at your concern.
Okay, and I'd say, if you come out to Crane, that'd be a great place for both of you to visit, to see what they're doing and see what can be done to gain scheduled time back. It will be a national treasure and vital to our defense. With that, I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Takuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given reports that 21,000 DoD civilians have already taken the deferred resignation program, and with broader plans to cut up to 60,000 civilian positions, or about 8% of the workforce, there's a deep concern in Hawaii that these top-down reductions will compromise the Navy's ability to follow through on the Red Hill cleanup and closure. Mr. Secretary, you know how deeply personal the Red Hill disaster is to absolutely everyone who lives in Hawaii. Can you commit here today that there will be no reductions in the civilian or Navy personnel directly supporting Red Hill remediation and closure efforts?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Look, the Navy is executing the requirements and the remediation of Red Hill and they'll continue to be a great partner to the state of Hawaii. We are moving quickly, trying to get everything remediated as fast as possible and efficiently. And to my knowledge, there is none of the workforce changes are impacting our ability to do Red Hill.
Admiral, did you want to add?
I just say we get weekly reports from Admiral Kaler, the Pac Fleet Commander, and I have seen no concerns there, but I'm committed, just as the Secretary is, to live up to our commitments to address the issues at Red Hill.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, to be clear, the Navy's not a partner in this. This was the fault of the Navy, and it is our responsibility to make good, to clean up on what will be a generational response to a hazard that has impacted the very water our service members and their families and our people drink. And so this is very personal. I know you're catching up and getting up to speed on a lot of issues, but Red Hill is one you should be intimately familiar with in terms of the impact it has had on the service branch and impacted, quite frankly, every single service branch. So the more that we can hear, because people are concerned, I've had them come to town halls saying that there were concerns that civilians working on Red Hill testing and remediation were going to be, riffed. They need to hear from you folks that there is, in fact, not just the $1 billion commitment we have already made, but there is a commitment on behalf of the force that we are going to make sure we stay the course in terms of closure, remediation, testing, all the things that are required as a result of this tragedy. And as you know, it impacts every aspect of defense presence in the islands. We are talking about the lease renegotiations coming up in 2029, and it doesn't matter which service branch you are. People think Red Hill when any service branch comes up and talks about being on the land. And so just to be able to have that firm commitment for our people is something that is absolutely necessary now and going forward. Moving on, though, Mr. Secretary, at the Shangri-La Dialogues, Secretary Hegseth said the U.S. plans to leverage allies' world-class ship repair capabilities to enhance our Navy's operational effectiveness and save taxpayer dollars. And you've echoed similar sentiments, speaking highly of your visits to shipyards in both Japan and South Korea. How do you envision our allies' role in supporting U.S. naval shipbuilding and repair in the years ahead? And how do you plan to ensure that these partnerships are supportive but are not supplanting efforts to actively build up our own domestic industrial base and capacity, workforce, and long-term self-sufficiency?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. As I said, look, we have a short-term problem, which is we have to get hulls in the water. The longer-term problem is we need a maritime industrial base. We need shipbuilders. We need that capability in this country. And the President has tasked me with making sure that we develop that and develop those jobs. So I think it can take the form of a couple of different ways. So one is, Hanwha has bought the Philadelphia shipyard and is looking at expanding and investing in that shipyard and building ships. I think we can learn a lot from them and their practices, which would be beneficial. At the same time, I also think there's potential for foreign shipyards to do some repair and maintenance work for us. Bringing ships all the way back from the Indo-Pacific may not always make the most sense, particularly in times of enhanced conflict or when things are a little spicier, as I like to call it. So I think having that capability with our allies strengthens our relationships with them and makes it better. So I think it could be in the form of JVs. I think it can be the form of them investing here. I think it could be the form of us investing over there as well. But we will need to build that capability out.
Thank you. I know I'm out of time, but please let us make sure we balance it so that we are also investing in our domestic capacity, the civilian workforce we have in all of our shipyards to both repair and build as well here locally at home. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, nice to see you. Admiral Kilby, General Smith. Hey, I just want to philosophically talk about something quick, and I've got some real questions. So when the Empire of Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they did it with the airplanes, and they targeted the battleships, the capital ships, thinking that would end the war. They didn't realize that how they attacked what they thought was going to be the significant asset was not. It was the thing they attacked it with. And I think maybe we're kind of looking at things not from the 21st century at this point, Because there's hypersonic missiles that our adversaries have that we have no defense against. And one of those singly is a ship killer. But you can't sink an island. So when we're looking at how we're going to lay all this stuff out, I encourage you guys to really look at our forward islands. You referenced that just a second ago about the material readiness of our vessels, but also fortifying Guam, making sure they have everything they possibly need, other islands in the Marianas, places that are farther forward that can't be sunk by a missile. So I would encourage you to do that. The chairman has led this incredible series of committee hearings about this defense acquisition process, and the one thing that we all agree on, Republicans and Democrats, is that it's broken. And let me just tell you how bad this has gotten. In 1951, Congress authorized the USS Nautilus, first nuclear-powered submarine in the world. It was launched 3 years later. So from Congress saying build a nuclear submarine, 3 years later, the hull went in the water, and then in 1955, it was under the ice cap, right? So what we're trying to do is get to a place where we stop having all of these exquisite requirements to the point where we can't even build them. We had some shipbuilders here, and they said that the requirements that are being handed by many of the services are at a place where the technologies simply don't exist. Even if we had the welders, they can't actually meet the requirement. So I'd encourage you guys and gals, when you're looking at stuff, to say, figure out when is enough. Enough is enough. And then the last thing, I just want to ask you one thing here. There's 5 soft truths. The 5th one being most special operations require non-soft support. And when you guys are having these discussions, and I fully agree with making you guys a more lithe service, nimble and responsive, I just don't want you to forget my soft brothers when we're talking about removing platforms, because, SEALs don't fly refuelers, and we don't drive ships. And honest to God, Admiral, that's a great thing. We don't drive them because we wind up in the rocks and the liquor cabinet would probably be empty. But so I want to make sure that you guys are taking into account our special operations component commanders and that they have a seat at the table. So Secretary Phelan, can you tell me with certainty that our special operations component commands across all the services, because they depend on these platforms, have an actual seat at the table and their voices are heard by you guys?
Congressman, yes, thanks for the question. Look, I think it's critical, and I think the services, both MARSOC and SEALs and Naval Special Warfare. I was at SDV-1 on my way back from Guam, so I spent some time with that team and see some of the things they're doing and the capabilities they have, and it's very good. And same thing with MARSOC in Camp Lejeune is doing some very, very good and excellent work. So I think SOCOM, or Special Ops, has a unique role and has a big multiplier effect for what they do, and we'll have a seat at the table and part of that whole force structure.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Vindman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Phelan, Admiral Kilby, General Smith, thank you for testifying today. I have the privilege of having both a Navy and a Marine installation in my district. I have Quantico, the crossroads of the Marine Corps, and I have Dahlgren, which is really a gem that most people have not heard of, but has national level exquisite capabilities. And so, General Smith, I had the opportunity to observe Marines testing offensive drone platforms in my district in Quantico last week. And it was an impressive demonstration of tactical innovation. It's actually, I think the Marines are the first ones and the only ones that are testing offensive drones in the country on ranges. And some of these included commercial off-the-shelf products that were highly affordable. And I appreciate the focus of your testimony on the Marine Air Defense Integrated System, MADIS. You explained that we currently have the ability to neutralize threats from Group 3 to 5 UAS, but we only have the ability to disrupt Groups 1 to 3 UAS. We saw the Ukrainians successfully demonstrate in Operation Spiderweb. These small commercially available drones, especially Groups 1 and 2, pose an escalating and asymmetric threat to U.S. forces. how do we ensure that our forces have the capability to neutralize, not just disrupt these drones at the squad or platoon level?
Well, sir, you've hit on a challenge that we still don't have an answer for. We're looking for that solution. We're constantly innovating. We're looking at drone-on-drone strikes, which is like hitting a bullet with a bullet, which is difficult. But we're looking at some technological means to knock the drone out of the sky in terms of disassociating it from its operator, making it go to full autonomy mode, and then getting into that autonomy mode and disrupting that. So we really don't have a solution yet, but it is something that we are looking for.
Yeah, so in that scenario, if there was a GPS-hardened swarm of drones, low-cost drones, launched against a forward-deployed Marine element, those Marines would not today be able to defeat that threat. Is that accurate?
In this classified setting, sir, I would say that is partially accurate. We have systems that are designed to bring down drones, but they're unsatisfying if you're a young Lance Corporal.
Yeah, so I would say, obviously nobody has a solution to this, but the best test bed and probably the most innovations in this we're seeing in the European theater in Russia and Ukraine. And they have been fighting drone war for the better part of the last year and a half, certainly, although drones have been on the battlefield since the start of certainly the major invasion. And I'm concerned from both an offensive and defensive perspective. I mean, our installations are frankly not protected right now, and there are some things that Congress can do to help in that regard. I think 130I regulations and other things, I would love to see how we can help, how Congress can help, how we can break the logjam in this context. And I truly believe what we're seeing right now is sort of a revolution in warfare, certainly in land warfare, as profound as the introduction of a machine gun in World War I or aircraft carrier in World War II. And I think the Marine Corps needs to have dedicated doctrine and military specialists. And I saw what was a great potential example with the marksmanship team out there at Quantico, that they put together a team that had a CW5 EOD expert and others, and they just started doing things, and they had the proper level of approval, and that's where we need to be. We need to move fast and literally break things in this context, otherwise we'll fall behind. Admiral Kilby, again, Dahlgren is in my district, and I think that the Navy needs a similar doctrine. I mean, we've seen some of this in the Ukraine context, in the Black Sea. What do we need to do? How do we invest in this these unmanned systems in the naval context?
Thanks for the question. I agree with you about Dahlgren. I was stationed there for 18 months. There is a unique group of individuals there and an expertise that's maybe not known by others. I think we just need to experiment. And our area of non-traditional sea denial is an area where we're investing in unmanned air, surface, and undersea vessels to bring an effect to bear. And I just think we need to continue there, sir. I recognize I'm short on time.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you very much for your service to our nation, for your attendance here. It's been very helpful. Our Defense Department faces some enormous fiscal challenges and structural challenges. None are greater than what's on your shoulders with our nuclear submarines and our shipbuilding challenges. So just know that we want to be a partner with you. So as soon as you can come up with a path forward, please share it with us so we can try to help you move down that path in a successful way. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.